Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's fine. I'm delighted to welcome you to the final stint of the Women Ed Global Unconference. It feels a little bit bonkers saying that. It's been going since in British time Friday night. It's now Sunday morning. Shockingly, I believe that Lisa over in Canada is still awake. She's doing some sort of intense Women Ed marathon. I hope she's surviving. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Liz. Say hello, Liz. Hey.
Hi, from Switzerland. It's beautiful. We've got the phone coming through. We've got a proper storm going on in here in Switzerland today.
That's brilliant. Well, I am in the Midlands, and for the first time in about a week, it stopped raining. So that's something. Yesterday night, I did think I was going to have to buy an ark or something along those lines, sort of just fashion one out of various pieces. We've got a great lineup for you this morning. Shortly, I'm hoping that Mira is able to join us, and she's going to be doing a presentation Together We Rise. After that, we have Emily Meadows and Angeline Owl, then Nancy, and then we have a panel discussion with myself and Liz and a couple of guests about whether headship is still worth it. It's been a fun couple of years, hasn't it? Then we have Becoming a He for She Ally with Patrick and then Amanda. Then we have our traditional close. Jules will take us through gendered cheese. I'm sure she's excitedly waiting in the wings in order to do that. And then we will close about 10 to 1 o'clock British time. And hopefully it's by then I'm expecting Lisa in Canada to be snoring somewhere in a corner, because it will be maybe about 7 in the morning then. So thank you ever so much for joining us, and I hope that you've had a wonderful time over the last couple of days. Yesterday was a very large day, and I'm looking forward to today being just as exciting. Liz, have you managed to join us for much of the sessions so far?
Yeah, so I was in, I went hiking yesterday morning, so I missed some of the morning sessions, but I was in all of the afternoon and evening sessions yesterday and also Friday, and they were amazing. Every single one, it's just an extraordinary depth and wealth of experience across the globe. I came out last night, I was just buzzing. It took me ages to go to sleep actually, because I was just mulling it over. So amazing presentations yesterday, particularly last night. And Lisa obviously closed us last night and made everybody cry, which was a little bit much, Lisa. No. But it was really impressive. And I'm looking forward to today as well. We've got again an international representation, so that's always close to my heart. So I'm looking forward to today.
That's brilliant. And I'm just waiting, hopefully, for Mira to turn up, because if not, they are going to have to listen to us whittering on for a little bit more time. And just trying to make sure that she's got access to the session. I know some people will literally join us right at the time, which is actually, to be honest, what we've asked them to do. Of course, me being me, I'm here half an hour early and sort of panicking and making sure that, you know, the light is right. But hopefully Mira will be joining us very shortly. Just making sure everything is all right. We are using a Menti this weekend that Liz will very shortly put in the chat. That has got 4 questions. If you could join in with our themes around disrupt and innovate and change and party and cake, sort of might have temporarily gone off script there, then feel free to get involved. And if you would like to tweet out this weekend, please use the hashtag WomenEd. We don't tend to add anything extra onto the end, just so that we can find it, but keeping it nice and simple, nice and easy. Excuse me. And then hopefully we will be able to find you. We also have the Facebook page if you are on Facebook. Liz has put it in there, so it's www.menti.com, and our code this weekend is 2006 0028. So that's 2006 0028. It'd be fantastic if you haven't gone on to Menti and answered the questions to do so, because we're tracking everybody's contributions this weekend. We will build up a beautiful pictogram of our current state of play and where we're going to go. Excuse me. I'm just keeping an eye to make sure that we can find Mina if she turns up. A little bit worried that she's not here yet. Hopefully she's okay. I think we all have a few technical issues over the weekend, but hopefully she'll be here shortly. Liz, is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to today? Just while I quickly check on the Women Ed emails.
Awesome. I'm glad you're going into the Women Ed emails, because I was just trying to do it and got stuck. So that would be great if you could take a look at that and see how we're doing this morning. So I think today, when I'm looking at the schedule, the theme of this morning is advocating for others. And I know from the number of Women Ed events I've been to, and actually at any event, whether it's online or face-to-face, what always comes back is, yes, we want the content, we want the information, but actually what people really value is the time to share and learn from each other. So please use the chat today, as we've got access to these amazing people from around the world, to share your thoughts and also make connections. I always think if you make at least one connection and learn one useful thing, then your time is well spent. Whether it's a Sunday evening, I think from Melbourne, Bernadita, welcome. Or whether, Angeline, now you're early. It's lovely to see you though, Angeline. Angeline will be joining us. You never know, Angeline, you could be joining us any moment now. Who knows?
Yeah. We may have to start a little bit early. If I'm struggling to find Mira at the moment and I can't find anything in the emails. So welcome to the first technical hitch of the day.
Brilliant. Well, I think one of the other things that we can start to think about is, when advocating for others, what models people have used across the world. And I think when we come through some of the sessions later, and I've got my international head on here. So if you're not international, actually it doesn't matter whether you're international or not. ECIS is a charity. It's actually based in the UK. Cam's here as well, the CEO. They have an amazing mentoring service for women in education. And I'm just going to give a little plug for it, because you can sign up to be mentored, or if you want to be a mentor, either be mentored or to be a mentor, and you can find people from across the world. So if you're a teacher in the UK, you could find a mentor that maybe is in the UAE or in Canada, like Lisa, or the other side of the world's a bit difficult, because then you get these time differences. So you've either got to kind of go exactly the other half of the way around the world, or part ways a bit difficult. But there's loads of people on there, and I'd really encourage us as participants here today to sign up either to a service like that or another, so that you can really broaden your horizons. I always learn so much more from colleagues in different contexts, and it really makes you think about and understand yourself and your own context better. So that's definitely worth a go.
That's brilliant. And Angeline is here early. We're going to see if her and Emily are able to start a bit earlier than expected, as we're struggling to get Mira on the line. And Elizabeth Draper is in our comments, just saying, hello, in the spirit of making connections. If there are others out there who work in further education, please can they DM me on Twitter? She's got a Twitter address there, or email her. Looking to find people in the further education community, which would be fantastic. So if there is anyone else out there that would like to get involved and would like to share their contact details, please do so in the chat. It has to be said, although Emily and Angelina are going to be doing a session at about, possibly at 10:25 on language matters and cultivating transgender inclusivism in educational spaces. It might be what Angelina might actually quiz you and Liz. For those of us that are currently very, very static in the British educational system, I'm just wondering, apart from petrol and maybe Marmite, what the benefits of working internationally in the international educational sector is. Every now and again, Liz will know this, every now and again I go, oh, you know what, just tell me what's out there, just tell me what the benefits are. And Angeline is in Germany, and when I was 16 to 18, I attended Munich International School, so I know it from a student's point of view. But while we're just hanging on, I'm really keen this week to know what the sort of the real benefits of working in the international sector are.
Well, I'll go first and give you a minute, Angelina. You didn't know when you came on early that we'd be commandeering you in this way. true kind of education spirit. What I'd say, and actually this is a really good example of international education. So I've worked probably half my career in the UK and half internationally. As you know, as mentioned earlier, I'm in Switzerland. I'm a CEO and director of a school in Switzerland. And what I love about the international sector is that you're free to teach. And we don't have some of the pressures that you have in some domestic systems where it's compliance driven. What we look for is how can we really create outstanding experiences for our young people? And of course, we're accountable to the communities that we serve. So our parents, many of our schools are fee paying, but many not-for-profit. So like mine's not a not-for-profit school, we serve the international community. And so what you can do in the international sector, hi Emily, is really focus on what is the right thing for your students and your community. And there's a real privilege that comes with that, but also a responsibility. If somebody says to you that you can teach your curriculum in any way that you want to, it sounds amazing to start off with. And then you think, well, what really matters? And it's really challenging as an educator to move beyond your own thinking and your own context. And I know when I've had conversations with staff, even just the teaching of reading, even simple things, well, simple things like that, you can find that teachers who have trained in different systems, who've got different understanding of how effectively to teach particular things, you have really dynamic and rich conversations about what you can offer your students. So I think when international education works really well, it's when you can really be at the forefront of education and cherry pick what you feel is the right thing. And so it's empowering. And what we know in terms of UK practitioners, I know we've got a lot of UK practitioners here, is statistically, if you come out into the international sector, in 10 years' time, you're more likely to be teaching in the UK than if you had stayed in the UK for the same period of time. So I think there's something really empowering. That's data from COBIS, which is the Council of British International Schools, is that you get a chance to really develop and grow as a practitioner. And the world is open. I mean, where else can you travel and see the world, but not just see it, be part of it, and then either stay internationally or go back to your domestic systems as well. That's my long ramble this morning. Angeline, you've also been in the, how long have you been in the international sector? It's been a little while.
Yeah, I left Australia to teach internationally in 2002. So quite a long time, nearly 2 decades. It's getting a bit grey, but yeah. So yeah, I would echo what Liz has said, and so you do have an opportunity to draw from the diversity of experiences of your faculty and your colleagues, because everyone has been trained very differently in how they approach education, and so you can, like as Liz said, cherry pick in a way and design a curriculum that's really hard. However, there are also like on the other end of that too. If you work in a national system, while it may be more compliance driven, it probably has some other benefits as well, right? So I know a lot of people here are working in a national system, and then some teachers who enter just an international school as soon as they graduate, they may not have had some of the experiences of like, for example, like, you know, how do you do playground duty, and and if you don't have like literal things that are how an ecosystem of a school, right, and all the different things that we learn. And so it also goes into how international schools can be managed, because some of them may not have all of those structures in place, and that can be frustrating. But it all depends too, and some schools, like schools in national systems, can be for profit, and some are non-profit, not for profit as well. And I've personally always chosen to work in a not-for-profit school. That has been a real, because I entered education really wanting to change, you know, education, and with a belief that education should be affordable for everybody, right? And so that's a part of my core of my values, and so I've always tried to do that. And so I think, though, that we are striving, as even an international school where I work, to be both inclusive locally as well as internationally, right? So we shouldn't also be in part of because there is a danger also working in international schools where you can be in your own island. And that's really not the purpose, I don't think. Personally, I think that it really needs to be also thinking about, you know, we are hosts, a country is hosting an international school in that country too, and it should be really thinking about how to integrate and to really it's a mutual benefit for both countries. So this is why I love Women at DE too, because I'm thinking about how I contribute to the local community and to pay back, and to think about the privilege I have of working in an international school system and what I can learn, the opportunities I have attending things by ECIS or CIS or any of these opportunities I have, and think about, well, how can I also learn from the local the teaching profession here, and also then we can benefit each other. So that's what I love about international school teaching, to be honest.
Interestingly, Angeline, the largest growth area is actually domestic students going to international schools. So there's increasingly, it's not the model of expatriate teachers, expatriate students. Increasingly, like I said, the fastest growing group is domestic students attending. And what we didn't mention all this, we kind of the practice of working in international schools. You also get expatriate contracts if you are an expatriate teacher, of course. You also potentially in many areas get the opportunity for your children, if you have children, to have an international education, and the school fees are normally included in the packages, or a proportion towards the school fees. So it's a different way of living and being, but incredibly enriching in so many different ways. And if it's okay now, Angeline and Emily, we're going to start with you slightly earlier than planned, because I'm not sure if that means we're really efficient or not, but we're going to, if you're up for starting, and I'm so pleased to introduce you both. I know Angeline very well because we work together in many different things, and Angeline is an inspiration in all that she does. I think she's one of the people that I've met that is just a real powerhouse of just getting it done and really building a network. And what you're so strong at, Angeline, is building positive collaboration with and between people, not just across Germany, but across Europe and across the world. You're an amazing advocate for the profession. And Emily, I came to one of your sessions. I was trying to remember where I came. I might have been in Cologne. I think I maybe came to a session. I just couldn't remember which city we were in. It's back in the days when we could actually leave where we live. And I remember coming out of your session and just feeling, wow, how sensible, how important what you were saying was. And it made a real difference to how I thought about some of the aspects that you were talking about, and some of the things that I do in my own school with my own students. And I know this session, this is a serious powerhouse going on here, starting us off on a Sunday morning. We're like kicking it off with like the caffeine fueled A team. So I'm really pleased that you're both here, and over to you.
Thank you, Liz, for your kind words.
That's really nice of you, Liz. Thank you. And I am also an Angeline fan, so I'm totally with you. And when she invited me to collaborate on this, of course, my first thought was, yes, whatever Angeline is working on, I am excited to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you just make sure that I can share my screen, please? Did I enter in the wrong way as a non-panelist? Apologies if that's the case, but I've just tried to share my screen and it's disabled.
Fine now, Angeline. Hopefully it's fine.
Okay, yep, now it's working. Great, thank you. Okay. Oops, oh, that's the wrong button, young lady. Okay. Oh, no, I did it again. Here we go. Hey. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so just a little bit about myself. I work at Berlin International School. I'm the PYP coordinator there, and I also work for CIS, the Council of International Schools, 2 days a week, where I'm an international advisor. And I'm the country network leader of Women at DE. Here is a little logo that our students created for us as part of their Creativity, Activity and Service CAS project. And so I'm very happy to share our "We Can Do It" sign. And I'd love to turn it over now to Emily. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thank you. I'm Dr. Emily Meadows. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an LGBTQ consultant for international schools. So I work with international schools really anywhere in the world. in person right now, mostly in Europe, but I also have been Zooming around the world the past year and a half or so. And I work with schools to make their policies and their practices more inclusive of LGBTQ students, either through policy design or professional training. I do, parent coffees and student assemblies and all kinds of things. So really sort of a wraparound approach to inclusion.
Thank you. And so I wanted to kind of set this up. I reached out to Emily and said, "Hey, let's put in a proposal. Let's think of a topic," because this was something that we at Women Ed DE were really thinking about and talking about and needed help with. So we are Women Ed, and so what does it mean to be a woman? And at this point here, so this is where I'm going to be really. I'm just going to go this way because I wanted to read something to you and I realized I haven't got my second device. So I'm just going to do this for a second in all my good vulnerabilities. So in an article that Susan Stryker wrote back in March 2020, she wrote that in 1949, the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir said that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. And in doing so, you grasp how the raw facts of our bodies at birth are operated on by social processes to transform each of us into the people we become. And so the intersection of those two conditions marks the status of belonging to womanhood in ways that do not depend on reproductive biology. And so when we think about what does it mean to be a woman, thinking about how are we born? What is our, physical that we're born with? And what does it mean to be womanly? And when we're thinking of Women Ed, our mission is for more women in education to have the choice to progress on their leadership journey. And so what common assumptions are we making when we do this? What messages are we sending out? And what are the possible impacts that this is having? And I guess, are we being the most inclusive as we could be with our messaging? And so when I'm thinking about that, we were thinking about what are the cultural norms that we are also sending out, because the cultural norms are the standards that we live by. It's like a shared expectation that we have. It guides how we behave. It guides how we form our cognitive thoughts as well, the biases that we have, the really implicit ways in which we are. And these are learned and reinforced from, of course, within our own families, with the friends that we hang out with, within in schools and our institutions as well. And so all of these messages are being sent out in society. And so when we organized a Women Ed DE conference, we were thinking, okay, if we want to be more inclusive in how we do, what opportunity do we have to maybe set a new cultural norm in how we are going to send our messages out? And so just to share a few ways in which Germany as a country is doing this. So here's an example of how to perhaps address this in a really systemic way. In 2014, Germany mandated that all state bodies use gender-neutral formulations in their paperwork. And 2019, the city of Hanover took that even further and said that all official communications, such as emails, flyers, and so on, would use gender-neutral nouns. Now, this is really important because the German language is a very gendered language, right? So you have male vote. Like we just had an election where, sadly, Angela Merkel retired. So you have a male voter, it's called a Wähler, female voter, Wählerin, and they were saying that all of our communications should just say a voting person. So this is a great example of how we are trying to be more inclusive in the language that we're using. And in Sweden, close to neighboring country here in Northern Europe, they actually added a new word in 2015, which is a gender neutral pronoun to their language called hen. And when they did this, the two big groups that were really advocating for this and was the LGBTQ plus group and also early years teachers. And early years teachers were saying that, okay, so they started using this word hen instead of the male male Han and the female Hon. And then they were looking at what the impact that this had on students who were going in, from learners who were in the early years, moving into primary school spaces and coming in with a more, without the biases that are associated with this. And so this was something that inspired us as well. So when at Women at DE, then when we organized our virtual conference this year, it was in May. We specifically did what we thought would be welcoming, without knowing having any expertise in this area behind us. But we thought we'd give it a go, and we just wrote, this free event is open to all women identifying and non-binary educators, he for she allies and friends. We were basically like, this means you, whoever you are, come. It was what we were trying to say. And we were really touched, actually. One attendee came, and she stayed at the end and spoke. And she said online, she said, I'm actually a nurse. She said, I'm a registered nurse, and I've come here because my child is transgender. And I was so inspired when I was looking at events on Eventbrite and saw yours and thought, wow, teachers who are recognizing this, and it gives me hope for the education system in Germany. And so we were so touched by this that, we had an impact on a parent, just from this one little act of adding this. And then we thought, well, we want to know more. And so I was like, I know Emily, great. And she's like, gender's my thing. And I'm like, excellent, tell us more and teach us how to do this better. And so at this stage, I'm going to hand it over to Emily.
Thanks, Angeline. Yes, I will say gender is my thing. So let's start with that. Angeline asked, the question that Simone de Beauvoir asked, which is, what is a woman? And I think starting with that is a really good entrance point when we're talking about what is gender. Most of the time when we talk about gender in sort of casual language, we assume that we're talking about gender assignment. That's also called sex assigned at birth. So essentially, gender assignment is when a baby is born, someone who's present at the birth, often a medical professional or perhaps a midwife, will do a visual examination of the baby's genitals, and they'll make a guess about how that baby is going to turn out as they get older and begin to be able to express themselves and their gender. And that's called gender assignment. So it's usually sounds like it's a boy or it's a girl, or sometimes they're intersex, and that's gender assignment. But actually, gender is much more complex and has a lot more elements to it than just our genitals. So another way to think about gender is through gender expression. I use a shoe here as an example, because certainly we do use clothing to express our gender. But it's more subtle than that. It's not just sort of clothing, maybe accessories, but it's also how we talk. We speak in ways that are coded by gender. It's how we move and the gestures we use, the way that we walk. We do this in such a way that it's not sort of a physiological imperative that we walk a certain way for most of us, or that we signal using our hands or arms in certain ways. These are things that we have learned to code for our gender. I recently bought a new bike. I live in the Netherlands, and so I don't have a car. I just bike and take public transport. So I recently bought a new bike, and I had to make a decision in the purchase. Would I get a men's bike or a women's bike? So even the bikes, there's sort of no in between. I have to gender myself with my bicycle. So all of those different elements put together create our gender expression. And then our gender identity is really internal. It's how we feel inside as either a man or a woman, both or neither, or for children, of course, a boy or a girl. And so when we think about gender, we think about using gendered language to be more inclusive. My recommendation is always to prioritize gender identity. So not sort of the genitals and you know, a guess when a baby was born, not the way children look and their clothes and their hair, but the way that they feel inside, to prioritize the child's perspective, the child's narrative, the child's voice. Thanks, Angeline. So when we're thinking about gender and making our language more gender inclusive, Angeline gave some really nice examples of the way that that's happening in her local context in Germany. By taking sort of the gender out of the language and making it more neutral, it allows people to all relate to the message, regardless of what their gender is. It doesn't separate people by gender. It doesn't exclude non-binary folks or agender folks. It says, this is just a message for humans, regardless of the gender. And that makes it far more inclusive. So even if you don't live in Germany, and even if your language that you speak or that you teach in is not as gendered as German, there are many ways that you can think about making your practice more inclusive simply by using more inclusive language. So one example, this is one that I hear a lot. So before becoming a consultant full-time, I was a school counselor. So I've worked in schools for many years, in international schools, most recently at Hong Kong International School. And I was in the early childhood division in Hong Kong. And I heard constantly, boys and girls. So people would address classes or large groups of children as boys and girls. And I know this was not something that is just particular to Hong Kong. This happens all over the place. So instead of addressing groups of people by their gender, boys and girls or ladies and gentlemen, you could instead say, for example, students, athletes, dragons, you know, depending on what your school mascot is, folks. These are oftentimes words that are actually more relevant to the context, right? We're in a school, let's call kids students, or we're doing, you know, athletics, why not call them athletes, rather than calling them by their gender, which actually most of the time has very little relevance in a big crowd. Preferred pronouns. I will talk a little bit more about pronouns in the next slide, but we've been hearing, I think, a lot more about pronouns in the mainstream lately. And you might sometimes hear them referred to as preferred pronouns. This is, I think, done with the best of intentions. But unfortunately, when we use the idea of a preferred pronoun, when we refer to it as preferred, this implies that it's sort of optional, like, oh, it's my preference, like I prefer this pronoun. Whereas in fact, pronouns are a reflection of our identity, which is not a preference, it's who we are. So instead of saying preferred pronouns, I recommend that you either just say pronouns or gender affirming pronouns, or you could say personal pronouns is another one. Those are all better alternatives that take away the idea of it being sort of a preference or optional. Rather than saying both genders, which implies that gender is a binary, that there's only two groups or two categories that people, humans, can fit into, and which completely erases non-binary people, you could say all genders. This makes space for everyone. Instead of saying born male or female, so I do a lot of work with schools on transgender inclusion. And instead of, I hear a lot of times people trying to explain, and again, very well intentioned, but trying to explain this idea of a transgender child while letting me know how they were assigned at birth and how they identify now. And so a lot of times they'll say they were born male or they're born female. That's a little bit of a misconception, because gender, as Simone de Beauvoir let us know, it's something that is built, it is constructed over a lifetime. So it's not how we were born. And so instead of saying born male or female, I recommend from the previous slide, assigned male or female at birth. So I'm seeing in the chat as well, this idea of like calling groups of people guys, and sort of gendering people, even in I shouldn't say gendering, misgendering people. So guys, for example, which I understand is meant to mean sort of like everyone, but it does have a gendered implication. And it's same thing when we talk about fireman, mailman, policeman. We often use these terms, even if we're talking about a woman or a non-binary person. So we could say, like, you might sometimes hear female fireman, right? Or a woman policeman. Instead, a gender neutral option is firefighter, mail clerk, or mail carrier, police officer. And these are terms that are much more inclusive if you don't know the gender of the person you're talking about. So if you're referring to sort of a generic firefighter, we often will hear the choice of the male gendered term. Much nicer to use the gender neutral term. It makes space for everyone to consider themselves potentially in that role someday. If you don't know somebody's pronouns, please don't call them it. This is just for things and objects. Instead, the grammatically correct term is they or them. So the singular they and them, if we're referring to someone whose gender you do not know. This is grammatically correct, and it's also far more gender affirming and inoffensive. So, for example, I found this teddy bear on the train. I'm going to turn it in to the lost and found. I'm sure they are so worried about their, teddy bear. I want it to get back to them. Right, so that I don't know the gender of the person who owns the teddy bear, but I can still talk about them in a grammatically correct way. The term transgendered, I see this a lot, and it's a quick fix to improve it. Just take off the ED. So instead of transgendered, you would say transgender or trans. And just a quick clarification on what this word means. A transgender person is someone whose gender identity, so how they feel inside, what we said on the last slide is what we want to prioritize, how someone feels inside. If it is different from how they were assigned at birth, that we might describe that experience as trans. So for example, someone who's assigned male at birth, but identifies as non-binary, they might use the word trans to talk about their experience. The word for someone whose gender identity, how they feel inside, is the same as the gender they were assigned at birth is cisgender, CIS, sometimes shortened to cis. So just for full disclosure, I am cisgender. I do a lot of work on transgender inclusion as part of LGBTQ inclusion. I am queer. My sexual orientation is pansexual. I use the term pan, I prefer, and it just means that my sexual orientation is not restricted by gender. Okay, next one, transgender people and normal people. So if we're talking about, oh yes, everyone is included, transgender people and normal people. Of course, I think you can see how that can be problematic because it suggests that transgender people are not normal. So instead of the word normal, here's the word that I just taught you, cisgender people, trans people and cis people. The word hermaphrodite is a sort of medicalized and dated and somewhat offensive way to refer to someone who has differences of sex development. The more common term now and far more accepted is intersex. A gay or a transgender, instead of using those as nouns, those are adjectives. So you would say a gay person or a transgender person. And finally, if we're talking about someone's real name, first of all, that can be confusing because depending on who you're talking to, people might be confused about what you mean by real. But if referring to a trans person's name that they were assigned at birth, we can call it name they were assigned at birth. Some people also use the term dead name, and some people also use the term baby name. So those are the names that they were assigned at birth. And then the gender affirming name is the name that they're using currently. So those are some tips on language that you can use to be more inclusive starting now, pretty much. And then the last little practical tip around language, like I said, we would mention, has to do with pronouns. And so there is a lot of talk these days about pronouns. You might have noticed that I introduced myself with my pronouns, and I've got my pronouns in my Zoom screen name. And you might have been seeing them sort of all over the place. So I have some tips for how to use pronouns in your own practice to be more inclusive of transgender people. So using gender affirming pronouns, the first step is just to identify your own pronouns. So that sort of normalizes the practice of including pronouns. It sends a signal that you understand that sex assigned at birth is not the priority. Gender expression, so clothing and things like that, is not the priority, but that someone's personal identity, their own gender identity, is what you prioritize. So it's a little bit of a signal there to say, you let me know your identity, and that is how I will address you. And it also takes the burden off of trans folks who are oftentimes put in a position to explain themselves and their pronouns. It helps to just normalize that practice. The second step to using gender affirming pronouns is letting students share their pronouns, but privately. So you can, there's a couple of ways to do this. You can let students know right off the bat sort of how they can share their pronouns with you if they would like to. So whether it's, write you a note, send you an email, whatever. But you might also, when you are doing sort of identity-centered work or introductions, make sure that you make it an option for folks or for students to share their gender affirming pronouns as one piece of their identity and never as a requirement. So I do not recommend going around in a circle and everyone has to say their names and pronouns. This really puts people on the spot, and there are some trans kids who are going to be really uncomfortable with that. Instead, you make it part of a bigger picture when people are saying hello. So, people have the option to give their names and their pronouns if they want, but they don't have to. And they can also talk about other things like where they came from, what they like to do, what music they listen to, whatever it is. Practice using singular they, them. So a lot of non-binary people use they, them as their personal pronouns. And if you're not used to it, it can sometimes people can stumble because it's a language. It's like learning kind of a new language. And so I recommend practicing so that when you are talking with or about non-binary people, you're not kind of constantly having to do that work on the spot, that mental work on the spot, and risk misgendering someone. There's a great website called Practice with Pronouns where you can pick the pronouns you want to practice with, and they give you kind of sentences with fill in the blanks, and you can practice doing this with they, them pronouns, for example. That way, if you make a mistake, it doesn't harm anyone, and you'll feel more comfortable when you are talking with and about non-binary folks. Number 4, apologize and move on quickly if you make a mistake. It can be really hard if we misgender someone unintentionally and we really care and we want to do the right thing. We might have a tendency to really talk about our intention. I didn't intend to hurt you. I'm so sorry. This is a big mistake. I'll never do it again. This can be problematic. It puts a lot of attention onto something that is potentially quite embarrassing for a trans person that they just would like to move on from. But it also centers you and your intentions rather than the impact it makes on the person. So to center the person, it's preferred to just quickly say sorry and move on. I also like to say thank you for your patience while I'm learning to correct myself, and I'll do better next time. And the last one is to keep the conversation going year round. So this isn't something that you just sort of put in your email signature once, you know, Emily Meadows, pronouns she, her, the end of it. It's something that you let students know that they can, that gender is fluid, that kids might change their pronouns at any point in the year. You know, gender identity doesn't sort of work on a certain schedule. And so keeping that conversation going year round. And I think we'll end with a wrap-up quote. I love this quote, and I think it's really important for educators. When someone with the authority of a teacher describes the world and you are not in it, there is a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you looked into a mirror and saw nothing. So I invite you to use language that makes room for all of your students and to let them see themselves positively reflected back and affirmed in their identities every day in your learning spaces. I will put in the chat here my bio and CV. If you have any questions, my contact information is on there. Please feel free to reach out if I can support you and your school in any way.
Thank you so much, Emily, for very, very useful tips. And I know that we talked about starting off our session 2, and I, of course, completely forgot to share my pronouns at the beginning. And so I am still working on all of the things I need to do to make it a better practice as well, and to make it more to practice it and to make it more routine, and so that it becomes my own new cultural norm, I hope. So we're going to hopefully challenge you to think about how can you challenge the gender binary in your own practice, and how will you actually adapt your language to be more gender inclusive. So these are some questions that we hope that you will take away with you. And thank you, Emily, for giving us really practical tips for doing that. And so thank you. So stay connected with us. And yeah, thank you so much for having us on your schedule, Liz and Kezia and everyone as well. Thank you, Emily. Liz, you're on mute.
You'd think by now we would have had this nailed, wouldn't you? You know, how long have we been doing? We almost did that like the kind of the on mute button. We need to click on our computer so it just does it. Can I thank you, Angeline and Emily, for sharing with us this morning on a Sunday morning. It was brilliant as always, and really practical and empowering. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming to know what the right thing is to do, and we all want to do the right thing. Having practical strategies helps us all. I can see lots of questions coming into the chat before we move on to Nancy. One of the questions I thought was really interesting, and it affects some of our schools but not all, is the issue of uniform and how we manage that situation. I think that's probably a whole hour's plus conversation in its own right. But can I ask that you continue the conversation on Twitter or on the chat, because people can engage with that. And I'd just like to do a big hurrah for Emily and Angeline. Thank you.
Thank you.
The primary teacher in me.
Round of applause. I see that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you both. And now over to the inimitable Nancy. So we've had Netherlands this morning. We've had Germany. We've got Australia in the chat. We've got Canada here as well. But Nancy is the most fabulous school leader from Luxembourg now. So we're kind of going around the world. Nancy, good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm so excited. It's the adrenaline is flowing. The adrenaline is flowing.
What more could you be doing on a Sunday morning, Nancy? I couldn't possibly imagine.
Nothing else. This is what we love, though. Those connections. This is what brings us out of bed every day. This is it.
It is so important, and I'm really looking forward to your session. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to stop talking, otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. Anyway, Nancy, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Those who don't know me, my name is Nancy Scucciarini, and I am a member of the Women Ed Lux group. And I just want to give a very, very big shout out to the amazing group of ladies that I work with, which we have Jolene, we have Claire, we have Ibti and Kathy. I would not be here without them. Their friendship and their support have been endless. So just a big hug. If you're out there, feel my hug. So I would like to start off with a little bit of my journey with Women Ed. And I didn't ask permission to use this picture, but I hope Vivian and Liz and Sue were, I'm just going to put it out there because this was the event that made me realize the impact of women ed and what mentors could do for us in terms of our community. And these lovely, lovely, amazing educators might not know it, but somehow they were mentors to me. They might not know it, but even from this point of where they would just give a comment on Twitter, give me some encouragement, I feel like this was the start of my journey with Women Ed and the impact of mentorship. And I actually feel it is this group, which I believe it was January, God, it could be 2020, it was before COVID, that started me and why I'm presenting here today. So for all of you, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. So right now, when I think about mentors, I almost get emotional to think about the impact they've had on my professional career and even personal. So what I would like you to do now is, without putting in the chat yet, because actually there's going to be a link that's going to be put in the chat, where I want you to think of 3 words that would describe how you feel when you had an experience with a mentor. Now, I believe it's going in the chat, and just how. So once you have it in the, you see that link, and thank you so much for putting it out there. Give me 3 words that describes how you felt. And I'll just wait a minute. So getting some words.
Other people can, because they're putting it in. I'm obviously failing somewhere.
Let's see. We're getting some. I have caring. Getting some more. Let's see. My computer's going crazy just now. And I think I'll refresh just a bit and see what happens. So far we have the 3 coming in: supportive, listening, and caring. Valued, thank you. Caring, reassured. Encouraged, thank you. And keep on adding to that list. Inspired, I love that. Reassured. Known, oh, just someone to see you. Even these words get me emotional. So keep on adding them as we continue discussing the power of mentorship. So let's go back here. So your words, thank you for sharing those words. And now, when I think about mentorship that's currently going on, it's going on all over. And what's powerful is, and most of it is on an informal basis, and it's been very successful. Just looking at the words, and even when I have that first picture with Liz and Vivi and Sue, I don't know if they knew that they were being mentors to me by just how they're engaging with me. And it is successful, and we don't want to stop doing that, capturing those moments. But when looking at how do we start embedding it, in some instances, when we do have mentorship, the success of mentorship programs, sometimes it's based upon an individual rather than the culture of a school. And unfortunately is, if this person leaves your school or the organization, so does the concept of mentorship. So this is where the title of this workshop came from, with the idea that this is my rationale, that we want to start embedding this culture of mentorship within our schools. So why this topic? Well, the first thing I thought was the campaigns for Women Ed. And the one that really resonated with me when it came to mentorship was Women in Leadership. So how does mentorship align with Women Ed campaign? Well, I'm so glad Liz is here, because anytime I need research, I would go to Liz. There's multiple research on how mentorship benefits women in leadership. I read this one article recently, I think it was in Ansala, it was like 2019, which stated that benefits included mentorship promotes women to feel more empowered and more encouraged. The idea that mentorship can also change the perception some women develop when their leaders don't recognize their talents. And lastly, mentorship celebrates achievements. So when I had this opportunity to present, I was like, this is really what would align with the campaign of women in leadership roles, and how do we further promote it? So when looking at, I've been reading a lot, and from this article, this statement really resonated as truth, that when we do have organizations that run effective mentoring programs, you see higher engagement, more positive and inclusive workplace cultures, and better leadership development. How true is this statement? We know it. So to answer the question, what is one way more women in the workplace can advance their careers, is a key strategy is to prioritize mentorship. And the focus here is on mentorship, not on sponsorship. And that I'm going to bring that up later, that it's really necessary to have a clear understanding of terminology. And when I'm looking at mentorship right now, I'm really looking at the idea of supporting mentees with their path and specific career goals. And to support women in leadership, a structured mentorship program provides an opportunity for women to learn from each other. And that to me is that collective wisdom that we just want elevated. And just look around, I was going to say, look around the room. Oh my God, I thought I was face to face for a minute. Look around the room. The wisdom just within the Women Ed Network is overpowering. That is what we need to start elevating. And imagine doing the same thing within our schools. So I started looking, before going to my little proposal, there were certain quotes that really resonated with me. And this one specifically, the idea that I read in Forbes, there was this article that was titled "The Power of Female Mentors, Why We Need More Women Leading Today in the Workforce." And then this quote, which you can read, there was a survey that was conducted by Olivet University. And it wasn't the United States, but I thought the data, now I'm afraid to use data with Liz. So Liz, you help me out if I'm doing something wrong. It had 82% of the men, and there were 3,000 people in this study, 82% of men had men mentors, but only 69% of the women had female mentors. So you can see why there is a need to have a structured program. And then this one, I just love, just in terms of the way of being our own force. Igniting this change in our school environment starts with each one of us right now. So I always say that after you do a seminar, you always have to have a takeaway that you can start tomorrow. So even looking at Angie's and Emily's workshop, I just thought, wow, there are 5 things I can start doing right now. And I'm hoping you can do the same when looking at what we can start doing in terms of mentorship in our schools. So from all the reading, because there's so much on mentorship, I thought I need something simple, even though that I could start presenting to even my school, because we have a buddy system, and the buddy system is one that based upon the personality of, and our target audience is only new staff right now, so it needs to expand. And then it's based upon the profile of the new staff coming in, and then staff members who volunteer. So right now I'm a buddy, I'm 58, and my buddy is 32, and she's new to Luxembourg, new to Europe, and we meet occasionally, and we do have a protocol, but I really want to extend how we do that buddy to make it more formal. So I call it the 4P approach, which is number 1, to look at purpose, number 2, to have partners, number 3, practical, and number 4, to promote. And the culture, so we're looking at embedding. Culture is rooted in behaviors, which are based on shared values, shared assumptions, shared practices and processes. And all of this exists within a mentoring culture. So the two align very well in terms of getting that mentoring culture within a school culture. So let's first start with purpose. To get the concept of mentorship embedded, you really have to start looking at the first is the base of the pyramid. Look at your school's mission and values. Most importantly, the alignment between your learning organization, its vision, And all the mentoring efforts, it's necessary that they do align in order to be embedded or to start to be embedded. So really look at your value system as a school, your mission, just even your profiles. What is it that aligns with the mentoring program? Then if you note, secondly, is what is your objective? What is your purpose for the mentoring program? And it really needs to be defined and documented and communicated. And lastly, and this comes with the idea of common vocabulary promotes common understanding. I mentioned before the idea that mentorship versus sponsorship versus, you might have instructional coaches. Your school needs to define what are the roles, what are the objectives of each one of those programs. So if you do have instructional coaching, how would that differ from the mentoring? So for me, the purpose truly needs to be defined based upon who and what you are as a learning organization. So that's number one, is purpose. Then we're looking at the partners. And the partners, I wanted to put partnership, but didn't fit on the slide. Why partners? Well, first of all, partners ensure that the mentoring is vested in the many rather than the few. And such a distributed approach maintains the integrity of the program, creates transparency, and it makes it a team effort. So before move forward with any mentorship program, please, your first contact would be your director or your CEO. That you need that support initially. And then you would start looking for those champions within the leadership, within the middle leadership, the staff, who can really support this program, but it's best to do it within a distributed model. Now when looking at practical, sometimes practical overwhelm people. It's like budget, it's schedules. No, I don't want to do it. Yes, we can do it. Remember, don't get overwhelmed with the practical for this third P. As we just said, there's partners in this. So promote shared responsibility and maximize resources. But it's crucial to acknowledge that when you want to implement this mentorship program in your school, these logistics have to be acknowledged. And these are the ones that usually create the most frustration. But if you do work with your partners, use them as support, get their collective wisdom to help get this embedded within your school. And the last P was the concept of promote. And promoting is the idea is, what skills are necessary to be a mentor or mentee within your school? That needs to be defined, and it also has to be practiced, and that leads to engagement. How are you getting that engagement? First, in terms of all the mentees and mentors together, or in terms to one-to-one. And then once you are working with the skills and engagement, how are you using reflection to build and further promote your mentorship program within the school? And lastly, which I think sometimes which is forgotten, is the idea of celebration. That take that moment to celebrate the small, the big. Celebrating is one of the best ways to create a mentoring culture. A mentoring culture is one that encourages and supports continuous learning. And when you celebrate, it identifies that the school is reinforcing a growth mindset. It inspires others and encourages support. Now, here's a summary. You probably have my slides. So this is just, before I conclude, this is just an overview of how you can start embedding mentorship within your school and also the impact on women in leadership roles. So before I go, I just want to say that, yes, it might seem overwhelming. A mentoring culture actually takes more time and investment to create than the actual mentoring program. It'll take time and effort, but let it grow. It will grow, and just have that patience knowing that there will be an impact. So before I go, I just don't want to say, oh, good luck. I just want to share some resources. That first, you have the mentoring Leadership Resource Network, which is brilliant. You also have the Center for Creative Leadership. And I do want to share that ECIS has last April, they then launched a mentoring platform. And this platform connects mentees and mentors to all ECIS membership schools. but this platform is also available for all women ed networks. So if you want additional information, I know Cam is here. Hi, Cam. This is available. So I really say go for it. It's amazing. And that connection, and it also has those resources that I mentioned. And so remember that this is worth it. I'll go back to the words that we started with. Let's see if there's some more. Wow, yay. This is why it's worth it. Look at the feeling that we have when having a mentorship program. So this is why we're going to do it. Right now, before I go, think of that person that connected with you, that just made you feel. Give them a text, give them a phone call, do something. And right now, before I go, and it's actually 12:05, I'm asking everyone to be 10% braver, to go out there and get that mentorship program started at your school. There's loads of ways to go about it, but just do it. Be 10% braver. So thank you so much, everybody. I loved it being here. Yay!
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. You're a power. I'm gonna say, I can't even speak. It's a Sunday. Anyway, you're blooming marvelous, Nancy. That's what you are.
Thank you so much. I loved being here. Thank you for this opportunity, everybody.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Bye.
Brilliant as always. And we know how important mentorship is. Come up throughout the last 3 days. Almost every session it's come up in one way or another. So whether that's formal mentorship or informal, when somebody's seeing something in you, it's so important. So I think we can advocate for that as our theme this morning. And again, thank you, Nancy, for giving your time on a Sunday morning. It's awesome.
Take care, everybody. See you. Bye.
And now, Kezia.
Hello, everybody.
This is an exciting moment.
It is an exciting moment. I'm absolutely delighted. For the next sort of 35 minutes or so, there's going to be a panel discussion. I say discussion, it might be more of a rant. It just might be the way things go at the moment, or it could be the most positive and life-affirming thing in the universe ever. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined. Obviously, Liz is going to be part of the panel as well, but we're also joined by Helena, who is a principal over in this somewhere like in the easty southy bit. I've never been to that part of the country, and we have Philip joining us. I'm absolutely delighted. The panel is around is headship still worth it? So we have 4 serving heads at the moment. This is Women Ed, but Philip joins us as a he for she ally to help us figure out if headship's still worth it, just as a general thing, rather than for women thinking, you know, is it a gendered thing in particular at the moment. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to start with Liz, just because it's going to be easier that way, because I like to put her on the spot. Just a few things. If you could introduce yourself, where you're the head of, the principal of, whatever it is that you call yourself, and why you particularly wanted to go into headship or principalship or whatever else you might call it. Over to Liz first.
Hi, thank you, Kezia. Well, there's so many questions there. I'm not quite sure where to start. But anyway, I'm a very important CEO. That's my title, CEO and director, otherwise known as in charge of the toilets. That's generally, and also mammoths. We've got mammoths here in Switzerland that go under my building and chew the electrical cables. I'm responsible for that too. So anyway, I've been here in Switzerland now for just over a year. So when we talk about is headship still worth it, and we think about the last year or two, I moved during the global pandemic from the Netherlands to Switzerland, ever so slightly bonkers. And like I said, I've been here now a year. One of the questions that you asked right at the beginning, Kezia, is why did I want to be a head? Well, the truth is I never wanted to be a head. I know, and I espouse like writing down which way you need to go, and that you should write, you should have these career maps. Well, to be honest, I've never had one. I've always gone where I thought I could make the biggest difference. And I became a teacher in the first place because I wanted to make a difference to the community that I served. I'm from Wales. I grew up in the valleys. I was educated as a teacher in Wales. I then my first headship was in Wales as well. So I'm really passionate about trying to realise the potential of every child, and that every child deserves an education. And my education, quite frankly, was not the best education in the world. And when I compare that to some of the students that I see in other parts of the world and where we have privilege, I want to do better for every student. So that's what got me out of bed in the morning when I was 20. And it still gets me out of the bed in the morning when I'm a little bit older than that now. And so what I've discovered is that as a teacher, I could make a difference to in the UK, that would have been actually I had 35 year 5 kids when I started, a third of them on the SEND register, and at that time, like no teacher assistants, no PPA time. Those were the days. It was glorious. And I learned an awful lot about teaching at that time, and I loved it. Then became a head over time. And what I realized as a head is I can influence, hundreds and hundreds of students and make a real difference. So really, I'd say headship found me rather than me finding headship. And I'm so pleased that I have the privilege to be able to do this job, but this job has got really challenging in the last 2 years, and we'll learn more about that, I think, in a minute. Where are we going next? Helena, should we come to you, then we'll come to Philip. Philip's in Germany, by the way. He's in Bonn. I love that. Helena, where are you in the East? The East could be anything. East of Kezia.
South Cambridgeshire. Come hunting, it's lovely here.
What about you, Helena?
Not my forte.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to headship.
So I've sort of read the brief for this session and thought it was important to try and answer that question. So yeah, I've in my 6th year of headship, kind of perhaps by accident as well, a lot of tapping on the shoulder, and if not you, then who, if not now, then when, which coincided with establishing Women Ed with Kezia as a co-founder back in 2015. So it's been an interesting ride, and I wanted to use this session really to perhaps not be as positive and life affirming, but actually to talk about some of the challenges, because as a mother of 3, I think actually it's those blogs and social media posts from things like Hurrah for Gin and the Unmumsy Mum that we all nod along with and say, yes, parenting is like that. Why doesn't anyone tell us about this? It's not all about cute booties and Instagram making memory moments. And I think it's important that we recognise that headship is tough, and how do we cope with the challenges? So like all heads, as Liz kind of referred to then, I've been navigating the challenges of the last couple of years and what it means to lead a school through a global pandemic, all the risk assessments, vocabulary I never thought I'd be familiar with, things that I'd never think about. I've got some obsession with window ventilation now every time I do a learning walk, all the things that we never imagined ourselves worrying about when we were studying our respective degrees back at university. But I think for me, I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to say some of the personal challenges that I've had to experience as a leader during that time as well. So at the last unconference, which was in October 2019 in Sheffield, I was heavily pregnant, back to have my 3rd child. I was the head of a secondary school that I still am, and I was also CEO of a small trust. And just going into maternity leave, I didn't necessarily expect to finish maternity leave in the way that I did with what was happening in the country at the time. So I had 4 months off. During that time, not only did the country go into lockdown, the trust merger happened. So I came back and I was no longer a CEO, my choice. For me, that was the important balance to take, to go to lead my school without having to worry about several others. But there was also an Ofsted inspection that happened in the middle of my maternity leave. And that led to my school dropping from outstanding to RI. So as well as the global pandemic and also flash flooding that's meant we've closed half the school on one occasion in the last few months, it's also been that particular turbulent moment I just wanted to kind of think about, is headship still worth it? So the moment where I definitely thought it's not worth it, I can remember distinctly. I was sat in my office with the blinds shut, the doors locked. I'd left my 7-year-old baby at home whilst I decided to come in and run an Ofsted inspection with my team. I was expressing milk, and I definitely thought, what am I doing here? Anyone else? It was actually my birthday as well when they decided to come. So I had a spa day booked. My baby was at home. It was my daughter's birthday when we got the phone call. Her birthday is the day before mine. Completely missed her birthday, completely missed my birthday, and was sat there in my office thinking, why am I doing this to myself? This is ridiculous. Is it worth it? But I'm still here, and I'm still ahead. So it obviously is. But I do think it's important that we've got a responsibility to talk about the low points as well as the highlights. And no offense to my good friend Vic Goddard, those heads that just say it's the best job in the world, sorry if that's what you're about to say, Philip, sort of belies the fact that it's not always the best job in the world. Sometimes it's really hard, it's really tough. It takes a lot of soul searching. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm originally from Eastern Europe, and of all the people I've ever known, I just need to stop working sometimes. It's not the hard work that's the problem. It's how it impacts on potentially your health, your well-being, your personal life and your family situation. I think we do need to talk about that more as heads, because those moments of severe guilt or dread or personal sacrifice are perhaps the ones that people looking from the outside in see, and they need to understand how we cope with that and how we balance that, and they need to understand that actually as a sector there's still a lot to do to tackle those particular moments. So I think we need to really call into question how headship can be sustainable and how we can keep that joie de vivre happening, even in those very dark moments, because otherwise we just have the attrition that we are familiar with in the profession, and we just don't talk about it. When I first established sort of Women Ed with Kezia and with Jill, I can see online as well, it started with a blog about lost leaders and how it's a real waste of talent that we have these amazingly talented women in the sector that never end up fulfilling their potential as leaders. And we talked about the systemic reasons for that, the barriers that happen institutionally and in our society that prevent that from happening. And I do think we need to talk about the lost leaders in headship as well. I've only been head for, this is my 6th year, but there are schools locally that are on their 3rd head in the time that I've been head teacher. That's crazy. You can't even establish yourself in a headship role within that period of time, let alone make a difference. So we need to be talking about why this is happening and finding ways. Is it to do with burnout? Is it to do with the incredibly toxic accountability system that we're still finding ourselves working in? Networks are the answer to that. One silver lining of lockdown has been how heads have come together. We've got rid of the league tables, we've got rid of the competition, we're vulnerable with each other, we genuinely openly share the challenges and the resources that we've managed to create over this period of time, which has been immense. And I think it's a real platform of opportunity. It's a chance for us to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to reach out and really make a difference. And there's definitely disruption that needs to happen in senior leadership level to prevent a system where you've got to sacrifice everything to be ahead. You know, moments like Friday when we had our year 11s back for a belated ball stroke awards evening, you have that immense pride and you think, this is why I do it. I'm so proud of these young people and the sphere of influence that I have the privilege of owning. But that's not enough. Those highlights are not enough to see us through those dark moments. And we need to make some noise and some turbulence of a positive way to make sure that headship is definitely worth it for everyone.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that, Helena. And I'm obviously I'm privileged to some of the journey that you've been on, and the immense highs, and also at times the immense challenges that has brought with it. I'm delighted, or I'm also very interested. Philip, how is headship over in Bonn, and has it been as challenging as it currently is in the UK?
Well, good morning, good afternoon to those in Europe. Thank you for having me today. I'm delighted to be here to speak with you all. Let me just start off by saying I'm a massive he for she advocate, so I'm especially thrilled to be talking to you today, and I've been following Women Ed closely on Twitter. Before I answer your question, Kezia, about what headship is like in Bonn and has it been as challenging, I just wanted to just say who I am, really, just introduce myself. I've been in Germany for 16 years. I'm originally from the UK. I grew up just outside London. Teaching was in my blood, really. My family, a great deal of them were teachers or were heads or heads of department. My mum was a teacher for many, many years. It goes right back to my great grandparents teaching, so it was really, you know, a natural choice for me. But I didn't want to work in the UK. That was the bottom line. I trained in the UK, did my PGCE at Nottingham, but then didn't want to actually, after everything I'd heard about working in schools in the UK, I thought this is not for me, and I want to go and actually go to an international school. Because I've heard that you could concentrate on the learning rather than the paperwork, to be frank. So that's why I went. I meant to come for 2 years, but I met my husband, and we stayed here. And 16 years later, I'm still in Germany now. So why headship? Well, it kind of, I suppose it's ambition, basically. That's the simple answer. I started off as an EAL teacher. I then was a class teacher of year 2 and year 4 and year 1, and then I was head of department, and then I was head of primary, and then a friend of mine told me that in Bonn there was a school. I live in Cologne, and in Bonn there was a school where the head was leaving. The head had been at the school for 37 years. And she was head of the school for 15 years. And so she was retiring. And so I applied for the job and got it. I had absolutely no training and absolutely no idea what I was doing when I started. And I think it's really important to say that it's all right to say that, you know, that you do go into headship. I think sometimes when people assume you know what you're talking about, I really didn't. And I've learned on the job, and it's been a massive learning curve. I've learned many things, particularly over the last couple of years. I've learned that I don't have to justify myself. I had this crazy week during lockdown where I found myself reporting everything that I was doing because I was at home and I felt that everyone was judging me, and, you know, that I thought I wasn't working. So I was emailing the board, telling them that I'd had 14 phone calls and answered 29 emails, and until they said, stop, you don't need to. So that was one thing I did learn. Another thing I've also been reflecting on over the past period of time with all the lockdowns and everything is about how important school is. And it's really kind of thinking back to my own school days. School is the core of everything, you know. Obviously your learning happens there as a child, but all of the drama, all of the social side of your life, the whole, you know, fabric of your life is associated with school. And to rip that out of a young person's life, I think was just massive. You know, it's such a huge knock to the fabric of their life. And so it's really reaffirmed my commitment to making it as beneficial as I possibly can as a head. And it's such an honor to be able to be in that position, you know, to make it an all-round experience for the child. I don't know how much you know about German schools, but they have a bit, public schools or state schools have a bit of a reputation for perhaps not taking the best care of the whole child. And at my school and other international schools I know, I think we're very passionate about, you know, the pastoral side as well as the learning. And I've also noticed recently, you know, just how much the children love school, which is really affirming as a teacher, as a professional working in the school. It's lovely to see that they're so glad to be back, and, you know, that things are getting back to normal, and they love going to assembly and like playing on the playground and being together. What you said, Helena, about it not being the best job in the world, though, is dead right. You know, I couldn't agree with you more. It is incredibly difficult. I'm naturally a very positive person and try to see the best and try to keep moving forward. And I really, honestly, don't have any agenda apart from that the children are safe, the children are learning, that the staff are safe as well, and that it's, you know, it's a happy place to work, and that it's a positive school. That's my only agenda. However, I am faced with a hard core of staff who are negative, and I find that very difficult. We had a very negative staff survey. We had some very positive comments, but also some very negative, very personal comments about me and about my style of headship, which I found very difficult. And that it's very hard, I think, sometimes when, you know, you as I say, you have this positive agenda, however, you're being criticized and it's about you. It's very difficult then to find the strength to carry on. I also find it incredibly challenging being the oracle, as I call it. I'm not the oracle. I don't have the answers to everything. And I really find that very often everybody looks to me for the answers to the most mundane or profound, difficult questions. Everything, you know, comes back to me, and I'm expected to know. So that's a big challenge. I also find, again, very personally, but I find my family, headship is a big challenge to my family situation. I mentioned my husband earlier on. He's also a head, but he lives in Munich, in the south of Germany, which is 600 kilometers away from me. And so we divide our time. We see each other every fortnight. And that's very difficult as well to, you know, and I do have these times of asking myself, what am I doing? Is this worth it? And particularly that question's particularly come into focus over the last couple of years, of course, with, you know, with everything that's happened, thinking, is this the right thing to do right now? And I'm not sure, to be honest.
I think that's fascinating. I think the idea about being the oracle, particularly over the last couple of years, has become very exhausting. I mean, pre-pandemic, I remember somebody phoning me up one morning saying they couldn't get their car to start. It was making this sort of noise. What did I think it was? And just thinking, I don't know, but the assumption was I was the head, and therefore I'd know what was wrong with their car. And obviously, quite often I also get people phoning me up saying, "These are my symptoms. What do you think's wrong with me? Do I need to go to a doctor?" Now just multiply that by about 1 million over the last couple of years. Particularly, I mean, I'm not sure what it's like internationally, but the sort of the public health guidance has changed about 1 million times. Should I be in? Should I be out? This person's positive. I've done an LFT, but I still feel poorly, and the idea is that you just know everything, that I am some sort of like virologist, some massive consultant, at the same time as being some sort of massive health and safety expert as well. It's just like I don't know anymore, and I'm just about to have a little bit of a collapse, and that becomes quite overwhelming, because it's not just occasionally. I'm probably getting I lead a large school. There's 1,574 children at the moment, with nearly 150 members of staff, and it's, you know, I'm getting it over and over again, you know, 5 or 6 times a day, and I still don't know the answers, because the answers sort of shift and they change all the time. So we know that there's, you know, that oracle is pretty difficult anyway. And Philip, you were talking about that personal criticism that you get at a time when sorry, that's my dog trying to get out of the front room, so if you can hear something going so I'm just going to delegate that responsibility. Evie, can you open the door? At a time when I suppose the public's access to authority figures, trying to get in contact with a doctor, trying to get in contact with somebody else, trying to get in contact with your MP, trying to get in contact with your employer. Heads and schools have remained a really easy place to get in contact with, and we are in contact a lot, and although quite often it's lovely, there are the you know, I don't think there's anybody that hasn't had at least 3 or 4 letters or emails from the if you allow your school to be used for vaccines, we're going to sue you, and we're going to take you to court, and we're going to come and pick it outside, and those sorts of things, up to, you know, my child definitely caught COVID when they're in your school because this is what you did. It's like, well, do you know what, they kind of could have caught it anyway, because they also caught a bus the weekend and they were down the park, because I know, because, you know, their friends said. So it's been very, very difficult, and obviously some of that is about what it's like in the UK, but also internationally. I'm wondering if there is something particularly about that role of being a woman head teacher, whether it makes you that sort of like mummy to everybody, or whether, you know, Philip, you were also saying that you are the oracle regardless, and that, you know, that's still there. Wondering if anybody has any thoughts on that, those sort of particular challenges.
Kezia, I'd say I think about one of my toughest days has been, and actually it was Philip, what you were just saying has really crystallized it for me. It's the fact that you're meant to be the oracle, but you're a caring, well-intentioned person. You do what you do because you want to make a difference. I remember there was one day where I had a member of staff who was, and this is one of the things I think about international school living, is that you don't have a natural family around you. I had one of my team was had COVID, hadn't left the house, had passed out overnight and hadn't called anyone. And so I was trying to work out how I was going to get my team. We were calling the hospital here in German, trying to work out how do we get her from her house to the hospital. In the middle of that, I had a parent call, outraged because a class had been sent into quarantine, and it was our fault because we're the ones that have to give the message. So we're the quarantine police now. And then at the same time, I then got an email telling me it's outrageous that we were open and we needed to be closed, and just all of that in one go. And I had that moment of, this is not what I should be doing. You know, I'm here to make sure that our students are educated and have the great life that all of us have been talking about. But actually, this is the reality of what we're dealing with right now, aren't we? We're still in, even 18 months later, we're still in critical incident planning. I mean, we'll be going in on Monday, all of us, and we don't know what would be different on Monday from what we left on Friday. How many of us now on a Sunday night check in just to see how many students have got COVID, how many staff have got COVID, or whatever else, any government rules, in Switzerland, cantonal rules, things constantly shift. And as the head, you've got to hold steady for your staff. You've got to protect your staff. You've got to look out for them as well as your students. And that's the bit that I think is really, this job is always tough. It's never been easy. We could have had this conversation, I bet we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I remember even 15 years, you know, it is not easy because we're dealing with people. But this is the extra layer that I think for so many is just push people over the edge. And we have to, as leaders, find a way to keep ourselves connected so that we're just not always giving, and we've got nothing left to give, because then we will not be able to do what our real core is and why we get up in the morning. And I think opportunities like this, just to talk honestly, that we are human beings and we're doing the best that we can for the people that we serve. I think that's the bit that maybe we opportunities like this to talk openly and honestly about it is really important.
I absolutely agree with that. And the job's tough, but, we volunteer for it in a way, we say, yeah, we'll take this on. And I don't think anyone takes on the role of head teacher thinking it's number one, going to be a laugh. And number two, it's going to be really easy the whole time. We know it's going to be a challenge, but we do that because we have a sense of service and we're up for the challenge. And I think we want to do what's best for the students as well as the staff and our communities. I think the last 2 years have been particularly challenging, and I am going back to Helena and just thinking, is there something about the additional accountability of the UK Ofsted system and the fact that they are still visiting, they are still inspecting, people are having visits at the moment, and I am seeing some extremely bruising conversations from head teachers saying, they've come in and they want to know why I've got gaps, and it's like, well, do you know what, COVID? And they're like, well, yeah, but everybody's got that, so what else are you doing? So I'm just wondering whether there is an additional layer of accountability in the UK, or whether there is, whether this, that there are other forms of that additional accountability abroad. What are your thoughts on that, Helena?
Nothing's gone away during this period of time, and that's the issue. Like, there was a brief bit of respite where everyone realized, oh, you're trying to feed your communities and turn into something completely different, but then it was sort of business back to usual. We've actually had 2 Ofsted inspections. So the first one I mentioned in February 2020, we also visited for a monitoring visit in the last week of term in July, just gone, 2 days before my floods. So, and after 13 hours of doing track and trace at the weekend, that was actually quite a good experience, to the point where I found myself saying to the lead inspector at the end, as did my assistant head, completely unrelated, thank you for being so humane and professional. I think that's interesting in itself, that I felt the need to thank them, because it was a positive, fair listening experience. Were my whole staff ready on July the 13th for a monitoring visit when they were absolutely on their knees and still operating in bubbles? No, they weren't. Did we shine as much as we would have done in other circumstances? No, we didn't, but it was still a really positive experience. And I think you just can't keep layering expectations on the school system, because something's got to give, and we do need to get back to a more intelligent and humane system that recognises the sector that we're now in, and the challenges that we face, rather than just expecting it to be as it was previous. The framework hasn't changed to reflect that. There's a sentence to say you've had COVID, but other than that, yeah, I think it needs looking at properly.
Absolutely. I think that's important. I don't know whether our international colleagues have got any, do you look at the British system or the English system in particular and think that's a bit bonkers, or do you just think, well, everybody's got accountability and perhaps it's not as bad as we think it is?
Obviously we don't get Ofsteded, but I do follow many colleagues in the UK, and the things I hear about Ofsted, it's really shocking. And just you saying, Helena, them coming in at the end of term, it is bonkers. In my opinion, and we have to yeah, work somehow to find a solution to that kind of problem. I understand the point of the visit. I get it. And I support it. You know, schools do need to be accountable. We need to make sure that they are a place where young children and young adults are working in a way that helps them learn and that they're safe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that I support. But I think the way it's done with this sort of lack of sympathy for particularly for what's happened is very surprising.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I mean, we are accountable. We're inspected by people like IB. Don't get me started on that again. And also we have CIS accreditation as well. But we have more agency in that. It's meant to be a conversation. We are professionals, and it is a professional conversation. I think what Philip was saying, we all know we should be held to account in that we've got a duty of care for the young people we serve. And I don't know anyone who objects to that. But it needs to be done in such a way that our staff and our schools are empowered. It shouldn't be the energy being taken left field at this time, because we've been on that last, talking about marathon, it's London Marathon today, isn't it? You know, you've run a marathon, you're on the last 100 meters, you're on your knees, that's where we're at. But we've been doing that now for 18 months. So something's got to give. You're absolutely right, and I completely agree with you. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. You know, we're all under pressure in different ways, and there needs to be some empathy and humanity in what we do. And I come back. You know, we always talk as leaders about mission, vision, values, and are we really seeing that come through in the organisations that we're working with, whether that's Ofsted, whether, you know, whoever that is. And I think it's time for us to stand up and challenge. And we can do that collectively in our spare time as we connect with each other and find ways to actually say, no, this isn't okay. And I know that both Helena and Kezia, you're on the head teachers round table. So I've got like Arthurian. Whenever I hear the round table, I've got visions of you and you're like, yeah, yeah, that's what I think. But I'd love to know what you're doing in the round table, because you've got a lot of influence, and that's an amazing network.
I think people think we've got more influence than we have. It is a little bit like Women Ed. It's a bit like herding cats. It is non-political. We do aim to influence educational policy. We are able to talk to people sometimes. Strangely, everything's changed a bit in the UK over the last month. So that'll be interesting to see whether we can talk to the new Secretary of State and Schools Minister. We would like Ofsted paused. We do think there needs to be accountability. We think all sorts of things need to be reflected upon as we're coming out of the pandemic. Well, hopefully coming out of the pandemic. I say that touching an awful lot of wood. We just need to look at it and think about, is this the system that is best for our children and their families? I don't know, Helena, if you want to add anything to that, but that's kind of what we're hoping for. It is quite Arthurian. Ros McMullen is our Merlin, so that is useful on occasion. She weaves a bit of magic and calms us all down on occasion. But I think possibly, I mean, behind the scenes, what Head Teachers Roundtable has managed to be over the last couple of years is literally that network for keeping some of us upright. I've also had that with Women Ed. I'm very lucky. I work in Sandwell. I mean, it is, you know, a relatively deprived and quite challenging part of the country, but the heads here we're really supportive of one another, and that makes a huge amount of difference. You know, I know some places it's, you know, people are throwing daggers at one another's backs, but I think if we can support one another, and that is something that I firmly believe in. It's you know, Helena and I found ourselves through Women Ed. You know, we were lucky enough to also continue to serve together on the Head Teachers Roundtable, but more than that, just finding other people that you can talk to and just offload to, but also seek reassurance from and think, oh, that's a good idea. That's absolutely critical, and I think that's what's kept us going, really. I'm mindful that we probably got about 7 minutes. I'm also mindful that there's probably a lot of people watching this thinking, oh, bloody hell, I'm never going to be ahead now, or what am I doing? But you know, and what I would say is, I'm going to go to all three of you again just to sort of finish us off. That's probably not the right phrase this morning, but you know, it is still worth it, you know, and we do take the mick out of Vic. You know, he's trying to do more than just sell books when he says headship is the greatest job in the world. I think it is. It's also one of the hardest. I think that's what makes it valuable. I think being a head of, you know, if you're a woman, if you're gay, if you're Black, if you're Asian, I think that makes it additionally harder. I think the pandemic's made it massively harder. I'll be honest, I think Ofsted's making it even harder than ever at the moment, and it can be brutalizing. And I think we've got a perfect cauldron of everything tipped into it at the moment that is just winding people down. It's just grinding you down. But I still believe it's worthwhile doing. I still get an awful lot of pleasure from it. I still feel I'm making a difference in the world, and I think therefore that I'm going to keep on going, you know, until literally I'll probably collapse. But I'm you know, just going to come around to each of you. I'll ask Liz, and then I'll ask Philip, and then I'll ask Helena, and then thank you, just all of you, for your time this morning. And yeah, this is a conversation that can continue on Twitter and in the chat box and what have you. So Liz, still worth it? Still recommend it?
Yes, of course I do. But the reason I do is because in these times, our students need us more than ever. And Philip was talking about how important that realization of what schools do for our communities. We're in different, we're almost all in different countries, but we're all in very different types of schools. But regardless, students' needs are the same. They need to be safe. They need to be nurtured. They need to be cared for. And what a privilege that we can lead our communities in that. But the but is that if you're stepping into leadership, you know it's going to be tough, and this is even more important, that you put as much time as you put into giving to others, you also put time into giving to yourself, in whatever that means for you. For me, it's these networks. I really value, you know, we've been isolated. I've like not been anywhere. I'm in the mountains here. I haven't been literally nowhere. Although hopefully London in 2 weeks, fingers crossed. I know, but anyway, so finding what works for you. So for me, the network of amazing people that we have here, and other heads and leaders that I call, you know, have a really crappy day, and I send that message, think, oh my God, and somebody would say, oh Liz, let's just catch up over a glass of wine tonight, and just a glass of wine or two, and a chat with someone who knows what you're going through, because nobody walks in your shoes. Nobody really knows what this feels like when you go at home, you know, home at the end of the day, and you carry the responsibility with you in everything that you do. So I think, yes, absolutely, it's amazing. Yes, there's a cost, and you have a duty of care to yourself to enable yourself to be the best that you can be. And that means looking after your family, you know, making sure that you can be there for their birthdays. You know, that stuff matters. And it's really tough to try and carve that out when we're in a critical situation. So I'd say self-care, that we need to be saying that really loudly, that it's important to have your phone off. It's important to not have to check your emails, like sat there waiting for the next thing coming in, letting everyone know how you work, and giving permission for that. Because if you do it, then your team will do it as well. And that's something I've been working really hard on this year. You know, I will not read an email on a Saturday or a Sunday. In fact, everyone has the critical number if they need me. And I've had to really fight to hold on to that this year. But I'm determined in that. And each of us will have a different way of doing it. So that's what I'd say. Yes, it's worth it, but you've got to protect yourself. You're not a martyr. You don't need to go down. You need to stay standing. And that way you've got to look after yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. Philip, your thoughts?
Yes is the simple answer. It's definitely worth it. Do it. If you're thinking about becoming a head, go for it. It really is, despite all the perhaps negative comments that I gave, despite those, it really is the most fantastic privilege. I just, the other day I got to work and I was in a bad mood. It was Tuesday morning, it was raining, about 4 people called in sick. I had to do all the cover. My deputy head teacher's off long-term sick at the moment, so I'm doing lots of stuff in the morning, operational stuff that she would normally deal with. So I was pretty miserable by about 8:30. But then I went outside and I stood on the gate, as I do every morning, and I welcomed all the children, and that completely changed my day and set me up and just made me feel positive again. And I thought, well, that's why I do it, because those kids are lovely, and that's the bottom line, is you do it for the children, and you do it for the, to see those glimmers of progress, of pride that you see in your team, is also really amazing. And sometimes you've caused that glimmer of progress, of pride, because of something that you did, a word of encouragement that you gave them, or a role that you delegated to them. That's a really fantastic element of the job as well. Also, I would say to anyone thinking about becoming a head is you're not alone. That's also something that I've really learned through networks like these, which have been wonderful. And I must say, Liz as well. Liz has been absolutely brilliant with me. You've been a mentor and a friend for many years now, and I'm incredibly grateful for everything, all the interactions that we have, both professional and personal. So your network is key. You need that support. You're not alone, and do it. You'll love it.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Just thank you in advance to both Liz and Philip. Helena, I'm going to come to you for your final thoughts, and that can be a final rant if you like, or just a final kind of nice soothe over everything. Over to you.
Yeah, I wouldn't still be here. I've said from the outset, I'd downsize and go back to being a head of English, which I loved, if it wasn't worth it. I'm not trapped. I'm not doing it because I need to. I do genuinely have that passion for having that sphere of influence with staff as well as students, but I think it's the conditions that need to be right. It's the support. Completely chime with what everyone else has said on the chat as well as on the panel around not allowing yourself to become isolated unless you have to legally, or lonely, that you do reach out and you connect with other heads. And I've found, certainly for me, making that decision to join a trust with other secondary heads has been the saving of me, really, because I've had that community of colleagues that I can really rely on and gain support from, as well as networks like Women Ed, the Head Teachers Roundtable, Heads Up, and other platforms that they have been really honest and genuine in their support. But I do think we need to change the narrative. I'm a fan of Wonder Woman. I've got a mug that I drink from in my office, but I'm not a superhero. We shouldn't be pretending that headship is about being a hero. I'm not sure I'm either a well-being supermodel either. I aspire to be that, Patrick. But I think we need to just be honest in how we manage the challenges.
That is brilliant. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for that. And I really appreciate the time you've given us. We're all on Twitter, I'm sure. Do come and find us. Loads of brilliant questions in the chat. If you're able to hang around and just have a little look at them and continue that conversation, that'd be brilliant. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Philip. And thank you, Helena. And I'm now really delighted to welcome one of our he for she allies, Patrick Otley O'Connor. Hopefully you can hear us. We've been trying to sort out a little bit of technical stuff in the background. Patrick, are you there? I can't hear you. Are you able? Oh, I still can't hear you. He's connecting to audio. To be honest, it's kind of reassuring that I'm not the only person that is occasionally a little bit rubbish. Patrick, now I think if you unmute, you should be able to hear. I've got a lovely picture of your skylight as well. Okay. Yes, we've got you. Patrick, I'm going to quieten myself and I'm going to hand over to you.
Give me 1 second. Can you hear me? Right, I've got to try some. Can you hear me now? Good. Okay. Some technical issues, so I'm not going to be using the slides. The laptop won't connect, so I'm on the iPhone. So we're going to go slideless, and I'll just talk to us what we're doing. Thank you very much. First of all, I do regard myself as being a he for she ally. And I suppose the perspective I'm going to give you today is from my straight, white, non-disabled, middle-aged male education leaders' perspective of allyship. The movement he for she was first talked about by Emma Watson, the actor, in 2014 at the United Nations Global Solidarity event. and a movement for gender equality. And at the time, it resonated with me as a leader within schools on the journey I'd been on, really, towards becoming an ally. Now, not always being an ally. I was a product of my growing up, and if I was showing this slide, you see a very cute picture of me as a young person. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and misogyny was rife. Racism, homophobia was just, it was part of my growing up and where I grew up, and didn't really know from the role models I had what was right, what was wrong. You went along with how things were. And it wasn't really until my career as a teacher that I started to realise how strong the role models, the women role models I had in my life were. So, for example, my mum played a very traditional role at home, but was very, very strong as a person, an elite athlete as a young woman, and that's approaching 80. She still walks her 20 miles every week, etc. And then in my early education as a teacher, there were very male strongholds in the staff room, male corners with jokes and comments made about women that were unacceptable, but did nothing to challenge that at the time. And it wasn't until actually a woman called Lynn O'Reilly joined the school when I was a young assistant head teacher at 28, and called out one or two of the comments I was making casually. And I took a good long look at myself alongside this great role model I got in school. And it was actually later that year I called out, I think as he for she, the first time, some inappropriate behaviour and language that I'd heard in school. A group of men in the corner making jokes, and I stopped it. Now, on that day, I lost some friends. I actually walked a foot tall and felt I walked a foot tall. And in terms of regard of the majority of my other colleagues, it elevated my position to be able to call things out. Now, my female colleagues were calling out, and I called out as a male. It seemed to have a stronger emphasis. Shouldn't have done, but it seemed to have a stronger emphasis. I remember my first promotion at school, just before this happened, about 2 or 3 years earlier. I was appointed, it was in Bradford, post riots in the late 80s. And I remember at the interview being told, we need a strong man for this job. And I was, oh, thank you very much. I took that as a compliment at the time. And it was very much about being a hero leader or a saviour, being able to go in and do these nights. I heard talking about the round table on the previous comment, it felt very much like that. I was out there doing good. And a very patronising, or patronising as my wife might call it these days, approach to how I operated in school on a number of levels. After that first time of calling things out, I was able then, it gave me strength to continue to be able to do those and act before the notion of he for she was coined, act as he for she. And I gained strength from that. And other people seemed to join in terms of doing what I was doing, although that was quite often difficult. And as I grew up in my career and moved into headship some 18 years ago now, I then had the ability to create a school in the way I wanted it to be created. And again, started forging ahead in looking really importantly at diversity and inclusion and equality within schools. And with the movement of Women Ed coming along, it really opened my eyes and gave a platform for me to talk as he for she, and then other such groups as diverse educators, etc., that allowed me to work as a he for she ally. That journey, moving from strong man to becoming he for she, I suppose I owe something to a guy called Jeff Mawson, who was my old primary school teacher, who the year I became head teacher, so 18 years ago, was the year he was retiring. And I went along to go and see him, expecting him to say, well done, aren't you wonderful? And give me lots of positive strokes when I said, I'm now a head teacher. And he used a quote to me, which was, a good leader is not a hero. He or she should be a hero maker. And it's about lifting the people that work with you and lifting and elevating people's voices wherever they're coming from, and actually talk really quite openly in terms of gender equality within the school he worked in and the schools he worked in as a male. And that was a good point for me as well, in terms of getting me to see things differently in the way I shaped my career moving forwards. I was confused for some time, and I think many men I speak to at the moment feel they step on people's toes because women's equality is an issue for women. It's quite often what I hear, and actually we can't step into the space. But the issues around women's rights is actually an issue of human rights, and as a result, it's the responsibility of everybody to join in with the movement. So, although I'm talking about from a male perspective, from a trans perspective, from any perspective, people that are supporting and elevating the voice of women, it's important that people do join in. So it's responsible for all of us and all within education. I think understanding the systematic societal issues that have played in our upbringing is important. And I think exploring an overused phrase, but that around unconscious bias, because of course, as soon as we're aware of it, it stops becoming unconscious, it becomes our bias, and continually have to be aware of that. I continually have to be aware of that. In fact, my actions as a he for she allow me to check myself, allow me to check in. And again, what's happened overall, and I would say, as I said around teacher wellbeing earlier on, this idea of becoming a he for she supermodel and modeling the behaviours we want to see, it reflects on my behaviour all the time, to look at myself and challenge myself and to be challenged, and to be continually be useful and impactful. We have to show those behaviours all the time. We have to call out the inappropriate behaviour when we see it. We have to model the way we believe things should operate. One of the pledges I made at the previous Women Ed Unconference was that I would try and engage more people as he for she to join the movement to be in. And I'm pleased to see many of those people have been joining during the conference this over the weekend. So I think it's we are the behaviours that we act out rather than what we say. So there are some actions that go alongside that. So here are a few I'm going to share now for the final part of this session. Some of the actions that can help us to be more he for she. So become a sponsor or a mentor for a female leader. So for a woman leader, people reach out to me quite often now because I've announced myself in this role. But as any male, you can provide that support. It's more than just being a coach or being a mentor, being a sponsor. It's somebody who takes an active interest in the career of that person and helps remove barriers and open doors of opportunities to support proactively that person's career or the struggles that they may be facing. I think for me, and I've noticed my American spelling of behaviour here, call out inappropriate behaviour, call out inappropriate language, call out the gendered language wherever we see it and be able to do so. That's very difficult the first time you do it, but I would say to all men out there who are thinking of being more he for she, be 10% braver. Simple. It's a wonderful phrase I use and overuse all the time. Thank you very much, Women Ed. Use your he for she influence. It's quite often easier to call out behaviour than it is for the people with a protected characteristic. I'm just going to switch slightly now to a conversation that I had within at a BAMED conference, and I was saying how difficult it had been as to be an ally for BAME leaders. And Angela Brown said to me, it might be difficult for you, Patrick, but try living a day in my skin. And actually that's where we are. So the very, very fact we're using our influence to call things out, it may be uncomfortable, it may be difficult, but if it's right, then we do it and be driven by that moral purpose. And again, the use of that inclusive language. The CPD we operate in school, is it truly a quality of opportunity for people? I used to believe that we became successful at school in terms of employment when hard work met talent. And I felt that for quite a few years. And it's only really with reflection now in my own schools that I work in as a head teacher, that I see that it's hard work and talent meets opportunity. And that's how people become successful. So with the statistics we have around women in leadership and the disproportionate of men that get to the most senior positions, what is the gender pay gap within school? What processes are in place for CPD to really support women leaders within our schools? And do we proactively promote those or encourage those, whatever level you are in school, be as a support staff, early career teacher, or even through to head teacher, executive head teacher, where again maybe greater influence, making sure that that there's real equality and inclusion in those processes. Likewise with recruitment and retention, there's an absolutely massive talent pool out there that's underused at the moment, and the issues around part-time workers, particularly strong for female, for women, but equally for men to model the same way as well. So men take seriously their childcare responsibilities. After all, quite often I'll hear staff complaining that the role models that the children in school aren't strong male role models. So we should encourage the men within our schools to provide strong male role models. And we should, as leaders, make sure that we embrace any request for time off for childcare, to go to nativity plays, etc., from men, as seriously as you do from women, to make sure that there's equality, but also we're promoting greater gender equality as well. And I think that untapped reservoir of women from wherever we are, we look at different ways of operating. How many times have I gone to a school where I've taken over and women have told me that they've not been able to promote to SLT because they're part-time, or they want to be part-time, or even to a middle leadership position. And I'm proud in my school, the schools where I lead, I have women at all levels who are part-time all the way through into senior leadership team where I've operated. It's just really important we take our time to listen to what people do. Now, this is not me saying this. This is what I've been told by the women I've reached out to. So everything I'm saying here today, I've not just made these up myself. I've researched these. I've taken these from many people who've spoken about the topic and subjects. And again, many people from the Women Ed movement who have, when I've wanted to pull a presentation together such as this one, that have spoken to me, have given me the suggestions that they would want to see included for here as well. Plus other men who operate as he for she as well, and the things, pitfalls they may have fallen into, or activities or strategies they've tried that have worked well as well. Because again, anything I say as a he for she shouldn't just serve me, it should serve the people I'm wanting to support and wanting to advocate and wanting to amplify the voice of and the celebrations of the women, and collaborate with the women to make sure it suits that purpose. I would also say finally on this point, and then we may have time to take questions or not on timings, but I think we should look to create real women-friendly workplaces. So where there's great stigma, I'm really pleased to see at the moment that more schools are talking openly about the menopause and perimenopause, and also about issues such as menstrual flooding or IVF and the issues that has, or around miscarriage, and many of those taboo subjects where particularly male leaders shy away from the topic to be able to talk, but encourage and provide platforms for women to do so, and for us to look at the policies we have within school. And in fact, the creating of the women-friendly workplaces are when we review our policies, that we make sure we do review them, not just an all-male review party, but a group of people who look from that perspective to see if they truly are inclusive and conducive to supporting women in education. So from my point of view, as a he for she, that's all I have to say for now. Can we return back to you, Kezia, if you're there?
Hello there. Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you for battling on without your technical sort of the. It's been a bit of a fun morning, really, for all sorts of things. But thank you for battling on. I'm really delighted that you persevered with it. I don't know if anybody's got any questions in the chat. It could be that they want to seek you out on Twitter, Patrick, and I've put a little tweet up for people to find you there. Thank you ever so much for that. You continue to advocate, which is really important. Women Ed is for women in education, but we certainly don't work in education alone, and that's why we always need to work in partnership with everybody, you know, in order to further our mission. So lots of love for you there, Patrick. Thank you ever so much. Amanda, hopefully I have now promoted you to panelist. Brilliant. Do you need to share
Yes, I do, please. Thank you.
So I'm going to make you a co-host.
Fabulous.
Patrick, thank you ever so much. I will see you somewhere soon. Amanda, you should now be able to have access to present and share your screen if needs be. That's brilliant. Amanda, I'm going to hand over to you and I'm going to shut up.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here this morning. And yeah, listen, I've already listened to some really great speakers this morning, which has been fantastic. So this morning I wanted to talk to you about something I'm quite passionate about. My name is Amanda Wilson and I'm a primary school head teacher. And I'm going into my 3rd year of being a head teacher. And I started in 2019 and in November 2019, I was putting together my business continuity plan. And there was a section about, what to do in the event of a pandemic. And I thought to myself, when are we ever going to be in a pandemic? And a few months later, we were slap bang in the middle of the pandemic. So it's been a really interesting 2 years. I have enjoyed it, I have to say. I like that kind of challenge. But it's made me think a lot about my leadership journey and supporting others. Now, one of the things that I am very aware of, and if please do keep in contact with me, these are my socials. It'll be lovely to connect with you. But I have been driving now for about 15 years. And I passed my test after the 6th attempt. And that was 6 attempts over the course of 2 decades. And so when I finally did pass my test, I was, you can imagine, just, it meant the world to me and I really appreciated it. And then my daughter took her test and she passed a couple of years ago and it took her 5 attempts. And so we're thinking that maybe this whole, we just like to take our time with tests and extend them slightly. But according to the Driver Standard Agency, it takes on average 45 hours of lessons to learn to drive. So with that in mind, I consider myself to be above average when it comes to driving, and my daughter too, because obviously it took us a lot longer than 45 hours. But what that made me think is that having now been driving for 15 years, I am a lot more appreciative of being a driver and what it is to be a learner driver. And so taking that leap to becoming an experienced driver and understanding what it's like, I try to be a lot more patient with learner drivers. So when I have a learner driver in front of me and they stall, I try not to sigh, I try not to roll my eyes, because I remember what it was like for me. I remember it took me 6 times to pass my test. When I get to a roundabout and learner drivers in front of me and they're trying to decide, is now the time to go? Is it now? Should I go now? Should I go now? And I'm thinking, yep, you could have gone then, you could have gone then. I have to remind myself of the challenges that I had doing roundabouts. And where I took my test near Kidbrooke, there's this massive, very big roundabout. And so I am of the mind that it's not about just tearing up the L plates and thinking, yeah, I'm a driver, I've arrived. It's about remembering where I've come from, the journey that I've taken. And for me, the same is for leadership. In leadership, it's not just a case of getting to become an assistant head or a deputy head or a head teacher and thinking, right, I'm here now, I just need to crack on with what I'm doing. So many people in presentations before have talked about the whole mentoring and coaching side of things. But for me, that is crucial in supporting the next generation of school leaders. Because if I don't give back and if I don't send the elevator back down, then the next generation of leaders is just not going to come up through the ranks. And so what I want to talk about today is the different ways that as leaders, we can make sure that we are sending the elevator back down, especially as female leaders. We need to be advocating for that next generation. And I know that in my journey, it has maybe coincidental, maybe it's just the way it's gone. It has been female leaders that have sent the elevator back down for me. Now, my journey has been sort of an interesting one. I've been in education. I qualified as a teacher in 2002, and it was my second career. So I came into teaching in my 30s. And I started in primary school, and in my second year of being in the school, I decided, I wanted to take on a role as the ICT coordinator because I felt I was ready. And although, back then especially, it wasn't the kind of, the common thing to become a subject leader so early on in your career, but I felt I was ready. And when I posed that to my deputy head and my head teacher, they were like, yeah, you know what, we support you. That's absolutely fine. And that was great because it gave me the leadership experience that I needed. And that was the support that came from people that were above me in those roles who didn't think, oh, you know, Amanda's not capable. That thought, you know what, let me give her a chance. Let me give her the opportunity and let's see what happens. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. Since then, I came out of schools for a while and worked for 5 years for RM Education as an educational consultant, but still doing stuff in schools. And then I came back into schools as a deputy head teacher, and I've kind of worked my way through head of school and to where I'm now as a head teacher. But it's been the teachers and the head teachers, my executive head teachers, that have seen that they wanted me to go further. They wanted me to really make that difference in my career. And I've been really grateful for that. And for me, to be honest, when I became a head teacher, somebody said it in an earlier presentation, I had no intentions of being a head teacher at all. That was not on my radar until probably 2 weeks before I applied for a head teacher role. My husband, on the other hand, had my career mapped out, you know, executive head teacher, CEO, all these kind of things. But for me, it wasn't until I was ready to take that step that I thought, actually, you know what, I think I can do this. And we need to be able to instill that confidence in the teachers that are below us. And one of the things I've come to realise is that there are many different routes into teaching and many different routes into leadership. And my route was roundabout. You know, I'd been out of school for 5 years. I'd not been involved in the whole levels kind of thing. And so when I came in as a deputy head teacher, it was, you know, very strange for me to get to know what to do. But we know that these days there are so many different leadership roles. You know, this is from the School Leadership in England document. And we know that there's, you know, middle leaders can be class teachers who are leading their classroom, advisory teachers, you can be doing things in your school, outside of your school. Leadership is not a linear path. And I think when we understand that, it makes it a lot easier to decide, actually, if somebody decides they want to go down that path, then we need to show them the different routes that there are. There are so many different routes into headship. You know, we've got multi-academy trusts, we've got free schools, like them or loathe them, you know, so many different entrance points. And there are so many different ways of being a school leader, a senior leader. You know, co-head teachership, it's possible to do it part-time. It's possible to share your roles. You know, I've met lots of primary co-head teachers, secondary co-head teachers. My executive head teachers were co-head teachers of an all-through school, and they did a fantastic job. And they advocate the whole work-life balance. They've got children, they've got families. And so it's really important as women, we understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Age is also no respecter of leadership. It's not about how old you are. It's not about how long you've been in the system for. It's about your ability to do a really good job. And as senior leaders, it's about recognising those individuals that have the capacity to lead. And that comes in different forms. And, you know, this is from the school census workforce back in 2000, a comparison between 2010 and 2016. And this kind of comparison hasn't been done yet for the 2020 census. But it shows that the challenge or the change in how many years somebody's been qualified to when they become a senior leader, middle leader, changes over the years. But that doesn't mean to say it has to stand as it is. I became a head teacher after 18 years teaching. But 5 of those years were not in teaching. They weren't in a school, they weren't in the classroom. So everyone's journey is different. And we need to understand that if we're going to support the next generation of leaders, it's not looking at, well, this is how you do it, because really there shouldn't be a rule book as to how you become a leader and when is the right time to become a leader. Now, earlier in the year, I sent out, again, like I said, this is something I'm passionate about, and I put out a questionnaire asking people to tell me about their experiences of applying for senior leadership roles. And when I mentioned senior leadership, it was assistant head teachers, vice principals, deputy head teachers, you know, that kind of thing. And so I asked the question, how long have you been a head teacher for? And the majority had been, you know, head teachers for over 9 years, or sorry, been teaching for over 9 years. And then the question was, have you ever applied for a senior leadership role? And the answers that came back in terms of those who said no, they hadn't, were really interesting. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to read through those responses. So this was people who said no, they've never applied for a senior leadership role. Now, some of the interesting things that I found were things like the second bullet point, maternity leave, putting a stop to those ambitions, which is really sad, really, because I saw a tweet yesterday about somebody who went on maternity leave. I think they wanted to apply for a particular role, and they were told, actually, no, maybe you should stick with where you are. And that really is an indictment for anybody that decides that because you have a family or because you have children, that you shouldn't apply for a role. And as leaders, as senior leaders, we should not be putting those obstacles in people's way. We should be allowing individuals to have the freedom to apply for roles if they have the experience. Work-life balance issues, they're always going to get in the way of your, they're always going to be there. Okay, there are always going to be issues with work-life balance. But as leaders, it's for us to help individuals to work through that and look at, okay, what can we do to help you and support you if you go into a leadership role? Opportunities is also important, making sure there's opportunities in our school, because very often, I spoke to a lot of people yesterday about, or a few people yesterday about opportunities in their school, and we looked at the fact that there are some people in roles who have been in those roles for ages and ages and ages, and it doesn't look like they're going anywhere, they're not moving in any direction. But just because those traditional roles of, of phase leaders or subject leaders are taking up, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any gaps, doesn't mean to say there's not opportunities elsewhere. We need to look outside of our schools. We need to be encouraging our effective leaders to kind of network outside of our schools and use their leadership skills in a different way. It doesn't have to be just in our school. We can enable them to share their experiences with other schools in the local authority and help them to gain the experience that they need. Because a lot of the time, if you haven't got the experience, you can't put it down in your supporting statement. How can you show what you've done if there's not been opportunities? So we need to be providing opportunities. And individuals have applied for a number of senior leadership roles, okay? So, over 25 applied for 3 or more leadership roles. Some people, have applied for a lot more, but a lot of those have been unsuccessful. And so then I asked the question, okay, what would have supported you in applying for your leadership role? Because a lot of people said they didn't receive feedback, or some occasions with other. And as senior leaders, we know how challenging it is and also how brave we have to be to put ourselves into a position where we're going to apply for that role. The supporting statement, putting ourselves through that interview process in the first place, having to sit before a panel of 3, 4 or 5 individuals who are looking to really grill down into what we know. It's a daunting experience. And so then not to receive feedback following that is quite demoralizing, and that will stop somebody from wanting to apply for a role in the future. So the question of, where you provided feedback is one that we as leaders really need to consider and take into account. Because if we want to see the next generation of school leaders come up behind us, we need to be supporting them. And so I asked the question, what additional support do you think would have been useful when applying for senior leadership roles? And these are some of the responses. Feedback following an interview practice. Now, I know that sometimes when somebody says they're going for a job or they're thinking of applying for a job as a senior leader, you think, goodness me, okay, I'm going to have to find a replacement. But actually, for us, it's an opportunity for, we've nurtured, we've encouraged, hopefully, that individual, and it's our opportunity to see our babies fly, as it were. And so it's making sure that we give them all the skills that they have to represent themselves well. So giving them some interview practice, giving them hints and tips as to what to do and what not to do is going to help them tenfold. How to survive, how to get an advice on how best to select a school. There's 2 camps. Should you visit a school? Should you not visit a school? I'm of the camp, you should visit a school. And I'm happy for anyone to disagree. To be fair, it's not out for debate. That's what I think. But You know, for individuals who decide to go and visit a school, it's helping them to understand what they're going to be looking for, you know, getting a feel for it, what kind of questions they should ask. We shouldn't be afraid to give that information to those in our teams who are thinking of applying for a senior leadership role. Supporting statements can be the bane of somebody's life, especially if you don't enjoy writing. So giving help with supporting statements can really make the difference. A lot of people have talked about mentoring and coaching, but sometimes some individuals will benefit from a mentor or coach that looks like them. You know, as a Black woman in senior leadership, there are very few of us, less than 3% of Black head teachers in the UK. And so for me, if I'm able to mentor somebody, another Black teacher, another female Black teacher who's thinking of going into senior leadership, that's going to help them because they will understand from my viewpoint, my lived experience matches their lived experience. But it's not to say that it has to be like that, but there should be that preference. There should be those options for people to choose who mentors and coaches them. Guidance from other senior leaders, allowing people to follow people, to shadow other leaders within your school, to get that experience. If they want to understand what it's like to be a leader in a certain role, the only way that they can get that is by seeing what it's like and understanding what it's like, and providing more CPD. And the other thing that people said was more openness during school visits, and head teachers telling them if somebody else is going for the job, if there's an internal candidate. You know, when I went for my deputy headship, I asked the question, is the current acting deputy going to take that role? And the executive head said, no, she wasn't interested. But it shouldn't be a secret. That helps that candidate to prepare. And this is a picture that I took back in March 2019 when I went for my, when I was going for my headship. And this is me sitting in, I think it was Costa Coffee or Starbucks. But it's a reminder for me of the journey that I've been on. And it's a constant reminder of how I felt and the emotions that I felt when I went for that role, because I always want to remember that, because it's important that I realise that those that are coming up behind me are going to be feeling the same way when they go for their leadership role. So, you know, some advice really for those who are in leadership. Recognise the potential of those in your teams. Provide opportunities for them to upskill and for them to find ways to lead within your school. Accept the wacky ideas, okay? Sometimes you get teachers who will come with ideas that are really left field, but sometimes it's not about shutting them down, it's about letting them try. And it's about realising that if they try and it doesn't work out and they fail, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, they have to be able to understand why it didn't work out and help them to see the bigger picture of why what they were trying to do didn't work out. Don't crush creativity, channel it elsewhere. And it's about sending the elevator back down and making sure that we really prepare that next generation. And for those who are leaders in waiting, make it known that you're ready for that responsibility. If you don't say that you're ready, then they're not going to think, okay, you know, well, she's happy doing what she's doing and you know, she'll crack on regardless. But if you think to yourself, you know what, I want more responsibility, make it known. Look for opportunities. They don't have to be big projects. They can be small things. It can be, you know, little things that you're doing within your class that some people might want to then emulate. It can be local authority things that you see, actually, I want to get involved in this project that the local authority are doing. But look for opportunities too. Deal with the imposter syndrome, very important. I've done a YouTube video on that. So please, you know, it's really important to remember that you have that place at the table for a reason. You were given that opportunity for a reason. If you go for a job and you're successful, then it means that you are qualified for that role. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. Find a mentor or a coach. Find somebody that you trust, that you know will have your back, but that will be honest with you. And watch what leaders around you do and don't do. You know, some leaders we think are wonderful. Some leaders you think, I could do a better job. But think about why you think you could do a better job. Emulate the good and learn from the bad, because it's all around. We don't, you know, as leaders, we don't all get it right. I've made mistakes. I've had to apologize. I've had to kind of think, right, how could I do things differently? Especially over the last 2 years, I haven't had a rule book. I haven't had a book that tells me how to deal with a pandemic. I've had to do it as I've gone along, but I've learned, okay? And it's important that as leaders, we understand that those that are coming up behind us are not always going to get it right. and we need to give them a chance and not think, okay, I don't see anything. You know, sometimes we need to look a little bit harder. And finally, I just want to encourage you to become the kind of leader that people will follow voluntarily, even if you have no title or position. Leadership starts even before you have that position, because it's a mindset, it's the thought process, it's a, I think I can do this. You have to have that inner confidence in order to lead. You don't have to be an extrovert. I'm an introvert, okay? I'm the last person to talk around a table at a meeting. There is no set criteria for what a leader should be. There are lots of leadership books that tell you that you need to have this, and you need to have this, and you need to have this, but leaders come in all different shapes and sizes. And it's okay to be different. It's okay to buck the trend. You don't have to keep the same narrative. We can change the narrative of what leadership should look like. The most important thing is that when you're leading, there are people following, because otherwise, as somebody once told me, you're just taking a walk. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. If I don't know if there's any questions, I don't know if we've got time for questions, but I'm going to stop sharing. And yeah, Kezia, back over to you.
Amanda, that was absolutely incredible. Thank you ever so much for that. If anybody does have any questions, please put them in the chat for Amanda. Amanda, are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter, yes, at Amanda910. Sorry, at Amanda Wilson 910.
That's fantastic. Find Amanda. I was really heartened by that, and thank you for giving up your Sunday for that. And I know that you would have made a massive difference to all sorts of people that were listening. And I just keep saying thank you. I'm just going to
thank you for the opportunity.
That's absolutely brilliant. In a moment, we're coming to the end of the unconference, and we're going to go to Jules for her usual gendered cheese sort of roundup of the year, looking at everyday sexism. Of course, we've got to get Jules actually been able to operate her computer, but she's normally quite good, but there she is. And in about sort of 20 minutes, we're going to be joined by the rest of the global strategic leaders, just to say thank you and goodbye as well. But Jules, as ever, it is now a tradition that you see us out. I don't know what that says about you or us, really. I think it probably says quite a lot about cheese. I'm just going to mute myself. Apologies to everyone. I'm having to eat because I haven't eaten anything today yet, and I could feel myself about to fall over. So I'm going to mute myself, and Jules, over to you.
Thank you, everybody. If anybody is here, I'd really love you to join in on this. I thought I could have a bit of a goggle box idea. So Vivian's joining us, Kezia and Patrick. I don't know if he realises he's got his camera on, but I can see him there. So Patrick, no, keep your camera on.
I just sent him a message about his camera. I was like, we're watching your ceiling, Patrick.
Actually, what I would really like, this gendered cheese, it will finish on a serious note, because but historically it is quite a funny one. So we're going to do a few funny bits, and so I'd all like you to join in, and you can just comment at any stage. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm hoping, oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Yes. Come on, Kezia, that's your fault. And then I'm going to have, once I can share my screen, then is it all right now? Oh yeah, here we go. Then hopefully we'll be able to share the screen and see all you lovely people that are here. So just have to wait for me to do, oh dear, oh no, if I seem to have frozen. Why have I frozen? Here we are.
It's never joined a real in life Women Ed thing. I'd like to pretend and say this doesn't usually happen, but it
always happens. It always happens. Brilliant. Right. So we are at the beginning. I'm just going to try and do my slide share. And then, so this is while we're waiting for that, I just want to explain to everybody what gendered cheese is. A lot of you know already. Some of you may not. So this is how I'm going to explain it. So this first slide here, you can see this baby grow that says, I love boobies and so does my daddy. And well, what does everybody think of that baby grow? So a shocked look, a head shake from Patrick, a shocked look from Vivian. You are welcome to turn your microphones on if you like, anybody, and say anything.
I'm
so
shocked.
yeah,
I'm
shocked.
utterly shocked. It's disgusting.
It is. And what we need to do is, oh, sorry, my screen is going all over the place. What Gender Choose was about, it was the reason I called it Gender Choose was this picture in the middle that had cheese for boys and cheese for girls. It was like Baby Bell. And they marketed it. Yes.
Can you make this, can you go on present mode so we can see it better?
Yeah, I'm struggling to do that at the moment, I'm afraid. I'm waiting. I've got to, sorry.
Just to move you, go down to the...
I can't reach my, I've got a,
all right,
this is a really technical thing.
That's better.
I've got a bar over my go to screen, so I hope it'll go up in a minute. So as soon as it does, I'll press that button and then I'll
that's
go into
better. Thank you.
Sorry. So the cheese was that, and then obviously these awful baby grows with the idea that from babies we are already tuned into thinking that we are very different. Okay, and this next slide here shows it again, that even to be a dinosaur you have to have a frilly bow around your neck, whereas you get the very factual dinosaur for the boys. And then this from Dumb Blonde, I'm too pretty to do maths. And even the worst one for me really is the idea that there's a nurse in training in pink and a doctor in training in green. So this is why we have Gender Choose, and this is why Everyday Sexism. There's some really good people to watch here. There's Let Toys Be Toys and Let Clothes Be Clothes are two very good people to watch on Twitter, and they are constantly showing some outrageous things like that. So what I wanted to do next though was, this is from the Fawcett Society, and they actually looked at gender recently, a report on gender stereotyping, and they came out with the idea that these supermarkets were telling all what they say to girls and not to boys. So it's glitter, sparkle, unicorns, dancing. In Debenhams it was all about love, and in Marks and Spencer's it's always about being best friends and staying together, being happy, to dream, to shine. And they're all lovely things, aren't they? But what they're not doing is telling the boys are brave and adventurous and speedy, and they're like rockets and they can take risks. So this can become a really divisive thing for girls and boys, that they're learning from a very early age that they have to glitter and sparkle and smile and be people pleasers if they're girls, and if boys, then they're allowed to do these adventurous things. Of course, this damages both genders and anybody in between when we're looking at these stereotypes, and it creates what we've seen in Women Ed, women that are not very confident for leadership, rather than the expectation that they may become leaders as they grow up. So it goes right through. One of the reason I put this poster up here though about be kind, I just wanted any responses from my panel, my Gogglebox panel here, on the idea of being kind. Is that a female trait? Is that for women?
I would like to think not. It'd be nice if everybody was kind.
I just want to say, from a man's perspective, I was criticised as a young leader for being too kind.
See, it's interesting, isn't it? So
I think my criticism would be different to that of a woman being too kind. I think a woman would have been, again, personally, I feel it was being done, would have been put down as a result. For me, it was I needed to, those phrases of man up
that
are used as well as that goes. And but that was, for me, in terms of, I openly talk about kindness being my superpower. I have 5 sons, all proud to be he for she, which makes me incredibly proud. However, I still know that's not the norm. And
that's damaging, isn't it? So if we're asking our girls and women to be kind, but criticizing our boys and men for being kind, that's a really damaging message for both genders, for all of us. And it's starts to show, I think, particularly in leadership around, you know, compassionate leadership and kind leadership. And we really have to disrupt that to show that kindness isn't something to be ashamed of. And so I'd like to see Be Kind on another sweater in the boys department. I'd like to see a gender-free clothing department, to be honest, in a supermarket. That's our ultimate aim. But it would be nice to see, you know, we are getting there, that, like you say, grow a pair, man up, boys don't cry, all those sorts of really damaging messages for boys, as well as for girls, that expectation that we're going to be people pleasers. From this Fawcett Society, these were their key findings from the report, which I thought were very interesting. That as parents and carers, we all know these things really, and it's still out there. 3/4 of parents say boys and girls are treated differently, and 6 in 10 say this has negative impacts. 70% of mothers and 60% of fathers agree that this unequal treatment affects how able boys are to talk about their emotions. And again, Patrick, you probably have witnessed and experienced that, even though you are trying, I'm sure you've been trying your best with your 5 boys to rail against that.
No, the point you said there is absolutely right. And men and boys who can't talk about their feelings or express their feelings, and I think particularly again, the pandemic's just exemplified or amplified things, but the number of boys we're seeing coming through schools now are really exhibiting breaking point. And to be honest, it's using the language we've been using throughout here applied to everybody. The language of kindness should be for everybody, but actually take this idea of, and I use the phrase, and thank you very much for this, Jules, be 10% braver, to the boys to actually become 10% braver, to be kind, to be able to talk about things and to do things in that way. And empathy is I think we need, like you said, those sweatshirts. Surprisingly, 3 of us in my family, the boys, we do have a sweatshirt that says "Be Kind" on it, because they do start selling those things for men now, which is good. But we need the same labels that we're saying shouldn't be girl only, boy only as well. Likewise, I think it's the gendered colours, the gendered language, which is specific, is so damaging.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that an awful lot. I wanted to move on now to, now I don't know if many, I wrote this for Schools Week recently, and it was during the Olympics, and I got a bit of my rant on, like Liz did yesterday. So, but let me just give you some terms that unfortunately schools have used against girls for PE uniform particularly, we'll start with. So one was the PE uniform must not be too figure hugging. So your faces, yeah. So figure hugging is not a term I don't think you would use for boys. So if you are in a school and you're asking people not to wear figure hugging PE departments, then we are really talking about girls in that way. Okay. Another one which came from somebody after I wrote this, I had lots of people saying that the same thing had happened, was that her shorts, this was a 12-year-old, were too short because they were too distracting. So it's a bit of a Gogglebox look there. So yeah, exactly. Too distracting from who? That's another one. So there have been a lot. And the reason I chose this week to write this article was the same thing was sort of happening in the Olympics, both ways, you know, policing to cover up and policing not to wear enough. And so the Norwegian handball team, which this picture is of, you may remember it, but they were wearing skimpy, they had to wear skimpy bikini bottoms, whereas their male team were allowed to wear lycra shorts. And they refused to wear these skimpy bikini bottoms, saying that they would rather wear shorts like the men. And they were fined by the Olympic Committee. The positive of this was that the Olympic Committee actually, the fine was paid for by Pink, who is a singer. And she was so outraged by that she was, oh, what's that, Kezia? You can turn your mic. Oh, you got a picture of it? That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, just showing men's beach handball team versus the women's.
Yeah, put that up on your screen because that's a really good picture of it. So you can see the women all barely dressed and the men in full uniform. So they get fined for refusing.
I'll put it on Twitter.
That would be great. They got fined for refusing to do that. So equally, however, we're asking girls in schools not to wear the type of figure hugging clothing that our Olympians are wearing. So they're very role models in running and in swimming. They are not allowed to wear in school. So I think, you know, our mixed messages around this are really important to get clear. And it's not so much that, you know, they can wear, I know I'm against uniform, but I am in the minority there. But so you know, we can have uniform, but we do need to be very clear about how we're policing it and whether there's some gender stereotypes going on around here. So here were some of my tips. Oh, sorry, I've gone the wrong way. These are some of my tips that I actually put for the schools week. Okay, so please never use terms such as figure hugging, or the other one is asking girls to protect their modesty. That has come up a lot. You know, girls should need to protect their modesty. Why do they have to and boys don't? You know, so I think that's a really good question. Are clothing rules equal for all children? So a gender neutral school uniform is obviously the best, particularly where it's coming down to rules. So if you are going to use figure hugging, I hope you wouldn't, but if you are, then it needs to be for all your pupils, not just half, your 50%. And then actually as puberty happens, because this does often happen around puberty, are we punishing girls for having breasts and bums? Is that something that suddenly, is that why figure hugging is becoming, you know, people are uncomfortable by it? So, you know, what are we punishing here when we're banning people for that? And then do our uniform rules mean girls are told to be ashamed of their natural bodies, which is another one. And finally, and this I think I'd like to include hijabs and afro hair in this as well, because there's been a lot of discussion around that and some very unfair rules, I think, around making stereotypical and assumptions about hair. So think through clothing and hair. And the best thing, as always, a diverse decision-making group should be making these rules. So if your community have children that wear hijabs and have children that have afro hair, then those families and those students actually should be part of making the rules, because that's your community. So, you know, I absolutely think we need to be gender neutral about this, but we also need to include and ensure that we have no assumptions that we're being made about this. This one slightly shocked me. Has anybody seen this? Just have a look at your face. So these were modesty shorts for 4-year-olds. Okay, and actually was the UK's leading police officer for child protection, maybe in a trying to be kind, express support for this idea that girls as young as 4 are wearing modesty shorts to protect them from predators. Okay, some shaking the heads, and you know, but it is, again, it's very body shaming, isn't it, that idea? And actually, you know, to start telling 4 or 5-year-olds the message is that you need to cover yourself up because there are predators out there. We really need to flip that on its head. We've seen that over and over again, haven't we? That we need to flip it on our head, that we must make sure that actually we've got to stop predators rather than, you know, we need to stop people attacking children if that is the case, not asking children to protect themselves from that. Okay, here's one you may have recognized already. I'll just read it out and see your thing. So this was after Sarah the terrible tragedy of Sarah Everard. So women, first of all, need to be streetwise about when they can be arrested and when they can't be arrested. She should never have been arrested or submitted herself to that. Perhaps women need to consider, in terms of the legal process, to just leave the bit about the legal process. So yeah, again, you know, the most dreadful crime perpetrated by somebody in trust, and the message from this police officer. I have to say, I'm sure it's not all police officers, but this, and you know, he was the police commissioner, I think, for North Yorkshire. The message was that we as women need to make sure we know the rules, so that if we get falsely arrested, we can challenge, so we don't get attacked.
Jules,
Yeah.
there's a connection, I think, between the horrible thing you're just sharing and the Norwegian team before it. Because when Pink offered to pay the what did they'd had to pay a fee, they'd been fined, that's it. When Pink offered to pay the fine, the Olympic Committee actually then said no, the Norwegian Olympic Committee is going to pay it. And they would not have done that if we hadn't been calling it out. Yeah. And this police commissioner who said this appalling thing then apologised because of the outroar. So what can we do to disrupt these things from happening in the first place, rather than people having to come on and do a kind of, oh dear, I've been made to apologise response? It's just shocking. This is what we have to disrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll see from the next one as well, and this is from Everyday Sexism, and they're absolutely right. After the disappearance, the police told women in Clapham not to go out alone. After Nessa's murder as well, our primary school teacher who was also murdered and part of, you know, our teaching community, Greenwich Council handed out attack alarms to women, and 78 more women dead, and we haven't learned that policing women's behaviour isn't the solution. So we're spending so much energy, like you say, Vivian, we need to disrupt that, because the energy we're spending on this is about protecting the women and asking them to protect themselves rather than finding solutions. Patrick, did you want to say something?
Yeah. There was an interesting meme going around over the past couple of days which flipped that narrative. That was a guide to avoiding sexual assault, ... for predators. And it was, if you feel like you're going to rape someone, then blow this whistle loudly until someone comes along and tell them what you're going to do. If you, so just all the things we've been advised to do, or women are advised. And I thought it was quite a funny or entertaining way to produce that. I think things have been done before, but how outrageous that we have to speak in those terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy Burnham, I have to say, hands up to Andy Burnham, another he for she, who has said that their response to this is to have a campaign for men and boys to talk about the experiences of women. So it is flipping it on its head, isn't it? And putting the focus in the right way. This was a very well-meaning from making her story guidance for women, but it just makes me feel so sad that is what we're suggesting. So
Jules, today I've just seen on the news about in Scotland. Have you seen that about the news this morning? They've put in those new rules to protect women, so that they know that they can call particular people if they're stopped by a single police officer. Again, the onus is put on the woman, and it's just all asked backwards, isn't it?
It totally. Come on. It's crazy.
And I loved the fact that someone said that we should flag down a bus driver. I mean, I don't know. I mean, last time I tried to flag down a bus when I was waiting at a bus stop, I think the bus driver just put his V's up and just drove. It's not going to happen. It's actually ridiculous. And actually, if you think about what's happened across the world in the last couple of years, resisting arrest, particularly for people of colour, is not a very sensible thing to do. And sort this out somewhere else, please. Don't put women at risk.
The message that we should have been seeing after Everard was, you know, actually, if a single police officer tries to arrest you, actually we're going to tell our police officers that we're not going to do that at the moment because women are scared. We are going to change our rules and make sure there's 2 police officers arresting, or we're going to, you know, we just need to flip it. It should be the police that are changing, not women. So, you know, so that, and my message really is this, really, don't attack women and girls. That's all you need to say. It's that simple. So that should be the message. That should be everywhere. And I wanted to finish really, and I know Gender Cheese has always been a sort of funny way, but of displaying serious issues. And so for me, this last slide, it's just a way of for our sisters who were just walking home, and we won't forget you. And that's Sabina Nessa, who a school teacher, so it's really powerful for us, and of course Sarah Everard as well. And so I wanted to finish there, and this year, Gender Cheese, it's the 7th Gender Cheese. I wanted to finish with, let's flip this narrative. We've got to stop attacking women for getting attacked, and let's flip that narrative. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. It was really lovely having you all here for that session. And back over to everybody for the finish and closing comments.
Well, I think we have, thank you, Jules. I think we've got Kezia next, and then we're going to close with the whole team. Kezia, go for it.
Hello, everybody. I'm just bringing it up. Yesterday, Caroline Verdant did a really lovely session, but she did forget to read out a poem that she wrote for her class, and I think it's beautiful. So it's called Skin, and I'm going to read it just on her behalf, just because I think it absolutely needs to be out there. Must you see the colour of my skin? Does it change the fact that I want to win? What is the goal? What is the prize if the colour of my skin is my demise? Do you see the colour of my heart as your hurtful words pierce it like a dart? Our blood is the same. I feel no shame. I will stand strong for the colour of my skin. Black skin, brown skin, light skin, red skin, white skin. Why so many skins? Take it away, and what do you have? Take it away, and what do you have? Flesh and bones, heart and soul, struggles and fears, disappointment, unanswered questions, determination, love, a spirit filled with hopes, dreams, and beauty within. The tears that I cry cannot hide the pain, yet there is still joy in the heart to you want to destroy. But my skin does not define who I am. Do you still see colour? Then you are blind to the fact that it is just SKIN, skin. Thank you. Caroline, thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining us. We have so many important things to do. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've shared something. I hope you've had a laugh. I hope that you've thought about something you've not considered before, and just thank you for spending this time with us. I'm going to hand over to my wonderful co-global strategic leaders, which sounds like a great name, but when you have to say it fast after quite a lot of time of sitting in the computer room, it's not quite so easy. At least I don't know how you're still standing. Well, you're not, are you? You're actually in bed. So over to everybody else. Vivian, would you like to say something? Vivian, you're in mute, woman.
Would I ever not like to say something? Woo! Yeah, I've just got a couple of points I'd really like to reiterate. Our 4 campaigns, we've nearly got everything up on our website around these, what we're trying to achieve, how you can get involved, lots of reading, things to watch, and we really hope that helps us all to disrupt, innovate and change. And please finish the Mentee for us, so that we can get all of your thoughts and ideas together and share it through our campaigns on the website. Caroline said that we can reblog her poem, so we'll get that done. And anybody in England who's really interested in the Master's Apprenticeship for Senior Leaders, please use the link that we are putting in the chat, or get in touch with me if you've got any questions. There, fab. Who's next?
Thank you very much. Should we go to Palm?
Can I just say what a fantastic weekend it's been. Kezia, you can tell you're an English teacher from that reading. Yeah, that was beautiful. But it was such a lovely weekend. So much kind of joy, positivity, a lot of disruption going on. Always these events just lift don't they? And they just make you feel so wonderful. But if anyone wants to continue the party, I know there's lots and lots of other events that have been put in the newsletter that Kezia is going to be sharing soon. But Vivi and I will be at Research Ed Surrey on the 16th of October in person, which is amazing.
Together.
So yes, if you are at Research Ed Surrey, do join us. It'd be wonderful to see you. You're right there, Lisa.
Oops, sorry, that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to go over now to Lisa because, as you can see, she's in the dark, and we need to go to her so she can go to bed, frankly, and actually sleep. You've done some sort of mega Women Ed marathon. Thank you for that, Lisa.
I actually am in bed. You know, my dream come true being in bed with all of the women of the world, but you know, I want to make sure those of us that are here, I think there's about 31 of us, if you've been through all of the weekend, take one thing away and tweet it. You know, I know the theme all this weekend was, you know, disrupt, innovate, and change. Do make sure you go on the Twitter or the Insta or Facebook even and share that with everyone who couldn't be here. And I do want to thank everyone who provided such lovely feedback for my session yesterday. It pushed me to be a little bit braver. And I know that I let go just a tiny bit more of the shame that still always seems to be lingering in my soul. So I want to thank this glorious committee and this glorious community for allowing me to be awake for, I don't know, 3 days now. Have a good week going forward and see you next year.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to go over to my co-host this morning, Liz.
Well, it's good afternoon now, isn't it? It's 2 o'clock here in Switzerland. So thank you, everybody, for an amazing 3 days. I often talk about the fact that we're one global profession, and we are. And what I've heard and seen and thought about over the last couple of days is really the power of the collectiveness that we have in our community, and how important it is that when we look back in 7 years, we've made some significant progress, but we've still got a long way to go. So I follow Lisa's appeal to, if you're listening or you've been involved in some part of this, is to do something for you and to do something for your community. So if you can do one thing for yourself and one thing for somebody else, then that will make a big difference. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Natasha, thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon. At what time is it where you are?
5 to 3 p.m. Sorry, we've just finished school. It's our first Sunday for us. Sundays on Monday. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, yeah, we're going back 100% from tomorrow. So it's been a busy day, but I did an assembly and I've never seen children so happy to be back at school. So yeah, that was lovely. Bless them. Yeah, so this weekend has been amazing, and thank you to all of you guys for allowing me again. This is my second year, obviously, of hosting and co-hosting with you all, because as you all know, I love you so much, and it's been like, yeah, just being part of Women Ed is just amazing for me. And I know that listening to everybody over the weekend, listening to all of the people that have spoken over the weekend it just kind of like gives you a bit of like encouragement and a boost again to get you through the year, which is just what I needed at this point, when you're like, oh, it's getting a bit crazy. This was, yeah, just a really, really lovely, uplifting weekend, I have to say. And, I think just to echo what Liz was saying then, and I suppose in the words of Jill Berry, is just, yeah, pay it forwards, like just, yeah, get together and pay it forwards. That's kind of my takeaways from this weekend.
Thank you very much, and good luck tomorrow with all of the children back. I think we've all been through it recently, and it's like a big wave coming through. So thank you. Enjoy that. And Jules, for some reason, I'm letting you have the last word. Normally I don't.
Don't give me the last word. I could ruin everything that's happened over the weekend. No, actually, what really strikes me about Women Ed every year is the old faithfuls that have been here for 7 years, and Jill Berry's one of those who's there, and Patrick and he for she, and
Victoria,
Victoria, yeah, knows. I'm sure I'm missing people out, but also the new voices that we get, and I find that so powerful, and I love that. I love how we're building and building and building. And it reminds me of that, we all know this quote, but I really want to say it because I think we do have an impact even then we don't know we are having an impact. And it's each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it, possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women. And for me, that really sums up our organisation, that it is for everyone. It's inclusive, and I love hearing the new voices. Every year it blows me away.
And what do you want to say, Kezia?
I would just like to say thank you ever so much. I'd also like to say to everyone, thank you for joining us online today. The fact that it's been online makes this pretty much the first unconference that's ever finished on time. Which is great, and now none of us have got any travel time going home. I'm absolutely determined that we'll get these in person again, because I think the love that can be shared in person is incredibly powerful. But we're always here for you no matter what. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for a brilliant few days.
We'll have to go on a global tour though, won't we?
Oh yes, yes, education tour, not holiday. I just want to say thank you as well.
Though, is it?
Mix it up. I just want to say thank you to the whole team, because we look swan-like, obviously, and people just do not see us paddling furiously behind everything. And the debate continues, because as soon as we finish, our pinned tweet will be our Women Ed edition of Innovate Journal, with yet more articles, global presence of authors, and it will help us all, sustain us all, to keep disrupting, innovating and changing. And as Lisa said, put it out on Twitter what you are now going to do in our year of being 10% braver. How are you going to disrupt? And what change are you going to bring about? And that's just what we're all trying to do, isn't it? Everybody, a team of giants. Thank you very much. We'll take that. And some fantastic comments in the chat. Really appreciate you joining us. Anybody else?
Did I miss the sharing for the Thailand thing? That was one of the things that
I don't know, Palm, I can't remember. Palm, did you mention it? No,
right.
I didn't. Tell you what, Natasha, quickly mention something about Thailand.
Sorry. So we've obviously got quite a few new networks that have joined us, Thailand being one of them, Taiwan most recently, and actually I'm in the midst of speaking to Hong Kong, which will be launching really, really, really soon too. But Thailand actually fits in really nicely with this, because on the, I'm just going to say 23rd, and I may got the date wrong, Miss Kasha, Vivian, could you check it for me, please, if I've got that date correct? But basically, Thailand have a webinar that they are running, going through applications and how to do that, how to put your best foot forward for interviewing, etc., and got lots of really amazing people up on the panel for that, including Vivian. 23rd, there you go, my dates were correct. So please join them for that, because it's one of their, it's kind of going to be their like focal for this year. So I'd like as many people joining that. And actually from an international perspective, it's a really, really good time, because that's when people start having to, hey Liz, because people start needing to hand in intentions for the year. So it's a good time to start prepping. So it kind of, fits right in. So there you go. That's my last thing.
And it'll be in the newsletter that Kezia is kindly going to send later today.
Unless I'm having a nap. And a cake.
You can have a cake and still send the newsletter.
Can't multitask. I've got the keyboard jammy. Right. Colleagues, I am going to bring it to a close, because even though we're remote, we are now over by 2 minutes. So, some traditions are worth keeping, and every message has been really important. You are wonderful people. You are my sisters, and without you, the last couple of years would have been almost impossible to endure. So thank you ever so much for that. Thank you everybody that's at home. Thank you everybody that's in random train stations and cars and wherever you are. Please keep safe. Remember, it's not your fault. If you do end up resisting arrest, blame Jules. So that's good. Thank you ever so much, everybody. See you soon.